Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Hey, fanfic family! So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 526 Taoist Priest Jilfen. In the end, under the relentless, unreasonable, and unyielding attacks of the old monk, the onmyaji from the island nation couldn't hold on for long after only about 7 or 8 minutes of stalemate. Once the acceleration spell on him wore off, the old monk, who had been waiting for the opportunity, seized it and shattered his protective spiritual light with a single blow to the crown of his head. He met a tragic end, his body destroyed and his spirit extinguished. Despite being the number one onmyaji of the island nation, everyone watching believed that he must have been holding back many powerful killing moves, life-saving techniques, and even absolute killer moves. But what good was it? No matter how many supernatural powers or magical techniques you possess, if you can't use them, it's all empty talk. And so in this Sino-Japanese Extraordinary Ability Exchange Tournament, Match 4, China Monk Yi wins. Under the loudly announced, beaming face of the white-haired elder, the number of consecutive wins for China reached 4 in the audience. The various Chinese figures present burst into thunderous applause, with cheers rising higher and higher. Yuan Datao on the podium also had a face full of joy, his smile never fading. On the other hand, the faces of the island nation's representatives were so gloomy that it seemed like black water would drip from them. They all looked at people with their heads half lowered, eyes rolling upwards, or looking sideways, giving off a sinister and unapproachable expression. However, the more it was like this, the more humiliated the island nation's group felt, the more they held their breath, and the more impatient they became. Therefore, seeing themselves defeated again, the fifth match began immediately after. Through a round of routine drawing of lots, the two sides who ultimately took the stage were onmyaji from Japan and Dao Wu from China. There's no need to elaborate too much on the onmyaji from the island nation. Presumably, in terms of methods, he should be similar to the old monk's opponent. It is rumored that the onmyaji lineage actually separated from the Taoist yin-yang tradition of China. Legends about them remain in various parts of the Central Plains. Later, they crossed the sea to the east, settled in the island nation, and combined with some local methods, adapting to local conditions, before finally forming the current onmyaji of the island nation. But judging from their skills, apart from having a shikigami-like contracted ghost to assist in combat, they are basically still on the same path as Taoism, drawing talismans, casting spells, setting up formations, dispelling spirits, exorcising ghosts, fortune-telling, reading feng shui, etc. And Dao Wu from China, although only ranked 5th among the Taoist sects who came this time, apart from Liang Yue, the intruder. His own abilities and skills are absolutely unquestionable because what he represents is the lineage of Maotian Taoism. The Maotian sect sent 2 people this time, Lin Jilfang and his junior sisters Hegu. The Maotian tradition is broad and profound, and it is a sect that emphasizes both martial arts and Taoism. The sect almost has all the traditions involved in the Taoist lineage. However, it is precisely because the Maotian tradition is too vast that the fields that the disciples under the sect are involved in and good at are also different. A brother and sister Lin Jilfen, who came this time, are proficient in the methods of catching ghosts, subduing demons, driving corpses, and destroying demons. The bias is too strong. Regardless of their abilities in this field, once they encounter a good martial artist or an opponent who is good at physical skills and close combat, they will easily be targeted. Therefore, after many comparisons, they can only temporarily rank 5th among the Taoist elites who came this time, apart from Liang Yue, the Taoist first. Those ranked ahead of this Maotian brother and sister also include 2 direct disciples of the Celestial Masters from Longhu Mountain, 2 head disciples of Quanzhen Taoism, and 2 swordsman brothers from Qingchang sect. In short, unlike the chaotic and turbulent situation in the Chinese secular world, in the current world of extraordinaries, the major sects are truly full of talents. And the situation is turbulent. Learning from the lesson of the previous match, where the old monk had the advantage of taking the initiative and was chased all the way to his death, the onmyaji in front of him seemed very cautious. As soon as he came on stage, he began to quickly pinch his fingers and chant spells, summoning his contracted shikigami. After a surge of smoke and dust, a creature with a rather strange appearance suddenly appeared in the arena. At first glance, This monster was about 2 meters tall, but its waist seemed even larger. Its entire body was dark green, with a ghostly face with protruding bones, long fangs in its long mouth, and a pair of sharp bull horns on both sides of its forehead. The body below the neck simply took on the appearance of a spider, and the ends of the 6 sharp limbs were like 6 sharp daggers. Every step it took could pierce thin, deep cuts into the compacted ground. However, judging from its temperament alone, this is not a particularly strong creature, at least in Liang Yue's eyes. Compared to the 8-tailed Shioni with the same name in the Naruto world, this thing is not enough to watch at all. If it were him who was on the stage, this would definitely be the type of guy who would kneel with one move. Unfortunately, it is Uncle Ying who is playing the game now. I saw that, facing the demon ghost summoned by the island nations on Miyagi, Taoist Jiufang appeared exceptionally cautious at this time. His eyebrows stood upside down, and his expression was serious. The golden greatsword in his hand was suddenly inserted into the ground, and then he reached into the front of his chest and took out a bagua mirror the size of a faceplate, densely engraved with various Taoist spells. Then, I saw Taoist Jiufang decisively bite the tip of his finger, and bright red blood suddenly overflowed. Using his finger as a pen, he quickly swiped a few times on the bagua mirror, and golden light suddenly burst forth from it. Then, he gently threw the bronze mirror into the air, accurately suspended above the Shioni's head, and slowly rotated for a time. Thousands of rays of light wantonly unfolded. The island nation's demon ghost below screamed suddenly under the illumination of this golden light, and was so frightened that it shrank its head. The 6 spider legs were desperately pounding, trying to quickly withdraw from the range of the golden light, but unfortunately, the bagua mirror at this moment was like a shadow, always chasing after the Shioni's head. It seemed to be able to automatically track ghosts bathed in this golden light. In a few breaths, the surface of the ghost monster began to slowly melt like a layer of wax that had encountered scorching fire. The Shioni was also immediately subjected to great pain, and the screams were higher than the waves. Unfortunately, the power of this bagua mirror does not seem to be able to kill the opponent at once. It can only rely on grinding time to slowly subdue the opponent. Looking at Lin Daoshi himself, after throwing out the bagua mirror, he then took out a large handful of talismans from his sleeves and began to hit the opposite on Magi. 5 or 6 at a time, 7 or 8 at a time. After the talismans were released, some instantly turned into golden light, some became fireballs, some turned into gusts of wind, some transformed into falling rocks, some became hailstones, and some turned into lightning. Boom. Crack. Gyuluhu. For a time, the wide competition arena suddenly became a disaster-stricken scene of natural disasters, and all kinds of ping-pong sounds were endless. Patches and patches of spells were scattered out as if they didn't cost money, firmly encircling the opposite on Miyagi. In terms of inventory, it is also almost endless. After a large handful of talismans were scattered, Lin Daoshi turned around and took another handful out of his pocket and continued to throw it. It seems that, for this extraordinary ability exchange competition, Lin Daoshi also made a lot of preparations before the game. Chapter 527 Shuten Daji. Of course, the island nations on Miyagi on the opposite side was undoubtedly the same, having prepared numerous backup plans to avoid losing face and life. Therefore, despite appearing somewhat disheveled under the barrage of Master Lin's attacks, frequently leaping and dodging to evade the power of the talismans, this on Miyagi himself remained almost completely unscathed, without a single injury, and possessed a considerable number of talismans for counterattack. Thus, the ensuing match, unsurprisingly, devolved into a battle of attrition. Both sides attacked relentlessly, refusing to yield. The arena was filled with a rain of fire and bursts of ice and lightning, seemingly endless, hurled towards the opponent. The ordinary spectators in the stands had never witnessed anything like it before, convinced everyone that both combatants were exerting their utmost strength, willing to risk injury and even death to annihilate their opponent. Of course, while the effectiveness of talismans heavily relies on diligent practice and the skill of the talisman maker, activating the power sealed within also consumes energy. Thus, after more than 10 minutes of such high-intensity combat, the arena had been transformed into a ravaged wasteland under the relentless bombardment of ice, fire, and various other spells. The Ashini Shikigami summoned by the island nations on Miyagi had also been inevitably overwhelmed by the successive waves of diverse spells. It didn't even have the chance to be recalled, dying a rather pathetic death. However, likely due to the depletion of their talisman reserves, the pace of attacks from both sides gradually began to slow down. Master Lin, with sweat beading on his forehead, unleashed 3 lightning talismans, took a deep breath, and seizing the opportunity while the opposing on Miyagi was dodging, quickly removed his celestial master's hat, retrieving a palm-sized wooden box from within, and extracting several stacked talismans. These talismans appeared extraordinary at first glance, with high-quality paper and vermilion ink infused with gold leaf. However, somewhat surprisingly, Master Lin used these advanced talismans rather casually. He simply spread them out, one by one, in his palm, and then gently tossed them into the air in front of him. Immediately, these talismans took effect with a surge of radiant light. Some of the talismans transformed into a bronze-colored shield of light, instantly enveloping him. Others transformed into a flying sword phantom, shimmering with a cyan glow. Still others directly vanished into the high heavens. Subsequently, the originally clear sky began to churn and roil, quickly becoming enveloped in a blanket of dark clouds within moments amidst the rumbling thunder that shook the very air. Flickering bolts of lightning began to gather. Upon witnessing this, the opposing Onmyoji was immediately alarmed, sensing the faint aura of pressure emanating from the surroundings, and dared not be negligent. He then removed his loose-fitting upper garment and laid it flat on the relatively intact ground before him. An incredibly intricate array diagram had already been inscribed on the inside of the garment. Next, the Onmyoji removed a string of bells from his wrist, gently tossing them into the center of the array, and then bit his fingertip. Instantly, blood flowed, and with a flick of his wrist, he accurately applied the blood to the key points of the array. Then, accompanied by the Onmyoji's intoned chanting, he suddenly crouched down, forcefully pressing his blood-stained palm onto the edge of the array. Suddenly, the array on the garment abruptly lit up, emitting a subtle, restrained glow. Immediately afterward, a gust of fishy wind suddenly shot up from the small array. Amidst the spreading crimson mist, a diminutive figure suddenly appeared within the fog, accompanying the sudden dark clouds and rolling thunder in the sky. A somewhat eerie man appeared out of thin air. This man had pale skin, disheveled blood-red hair, a wide piece of tattered cloth wrapped around his waist, and a large gourd slung across his back, from which the faint aroma of wine emanated. His face was painted with red hues, with drawn eyebrows and eyeliner, and his expression vaguely carried a drunken air. Upon appearing, this eerie man seemed somewhat confused about his surroundings, scratching his head and looking around. However, upon seeing his figure, Master Lin of the Nine Phoenix suddenly felt a surge of alertness. Without a second thought, he immediately formed a hand seal, pointed high towards the sky, and then brought it down heavily. Supreme Lord Lao, hasten as the decrees command. Summon lightning, catch a sound. Instantly, heavenly lightning struck the ground, carrying the might of the nine heavens. Crashing down, the void trembled violently. The dazzling stream of energy struck the eerie man's head directly in the blink of an eye. He was blasted into a deep pit. A large wine gourd on his back shattered, and the wine ignited by the high temperature, scattering like fireworks. Faced with such sudden heavenly power, the surrounding spectators were filled with terror, their scalps tingling, instinctively screaming and sinking into deep shock. The 8 trigrams mirror, which had been temporarily idle after the death of the Ashini, was once again reactivated by Master Lin, moved above the pit. Seemingly as a precaution, it unleashed a torrent of brilliant light, relentlessly illuminating the eerie man within the pit, whose fate was unknown. Master Lin himself immediately formed a sword incantation, directing the science sword light phantom in front of him to slash towards the opposing Onmyoji, swift as light and lightning. Unfortunately, the island nation's Onmyoji was clearly not an easy opponent, having also exerted his full strength for this exchange conference. Unbeknownst to anyone, 8 spheres, resembling neither gold nor stone, had risen around him. Each of these spheres was the size of a human head, with uneven surfaces and vaguely resembling grotesque ghost faces. With several mysterious incantations inscribed on each sphere amidst the clang and clash of energies, even with the power and speed of Master Lin's advanced sword talisman, it was temporarily blocked by the combined efforts of these 8 spheres. Just then, a shrill scream suddenly came from the pit. Immediately afterward, illuminated by the golden light of the 8 trigrams mirror overhead, a figure enveloped in flames suddenly leapt out. It was the red-haired eerie man from before. His aura was now turbulent, his face filled with resentment, and blood and scorch marks covered his body. Upon escaping, he glared at Master Lin with bloodshot eyes. Then, bearing the flames and illuminated by the golden light, he bared his fangs and pounced towards Master Lin as agile as an ape. His speed was astonishing, and in the blink of an eye, he was upon him. Chapter 528 Divine Fighting Technique. Clang, accompanied by a short and harsh metallic friction sound. Themin had already crossed a distance of tens of meters, and one of his claws directly struck the protective shield light of Taoist 9 Phoenix. Fortunately, the talisman that Uncle Ying used for defense earlier was of a high enough level, and its defensive power was also quite good. In the collision with the opponent's sharp claws, it only had a moment of stiffness before returning to normal. However, talismans and the like are, after all, one-time consumables. After being attacked, the shield of light inevitably weakened a bit in an instant, although the magnitude was not large, and it was almost imperceptible if you didn't look carefully. It was not a good sign. After using the shield light to withstand several attacks from the opponent, he then held the great sword in his hand and slashed at the evil creature in front of him. However, although Daoist Lin was agile and his body could be considered exceptionally strong, that was only in comparison to ordinary people. After all, his specialty was drawing talismans and exorcising ghosts, so he seemed a little stretched when he really encountered a close combat expert. Even though Daoist Lin's main opponent at the moment was also nothing, but how could something that could withstand the golden light of the Bagua above its head without any reaction be an ordinary demon? At this moment, relying solely on his agile figure and sharp claws, Themin had already spun Uncle Ying in the shield light around and around. In just a few jumps his entire figure was like a streak of blood-colored flame, constantly flying up and down around Uncle Ying, dodging the great sword's attacks while also frequently waving his claws at the shield light. Sing, clang, clanking. For a time, all kinds of clanging sounds spread throughout the venue, and under the continuous attrition, the shield light around Daoist 9 Phoenix began to become increasingly weak. Seeing this, the people in the surrounding audience seats couldn't help but sweat for him. In this situation, Uncle Ying, who was inside the shield light, was naturally anxious. Unconsciously, the science sword talisman that he was distracted controlling also became sluggish. Upon seeing this, the Opposing was immediately invigorated, and he let out a low shout, with two cold and stern lights blooming in his eyes reaching into his arms. He then took out a stack of talismans. Looking at them, they seemed to be just those mass-produced consumables from before, but they were already enough to reverse and contain the opposing Uncle Ying. As a result, in the following time, various wind blades, fireballs, and hailstones began to shoot out on the field again. What was different was that this time, Uncle Ying was only passively defending one-sidedly. The appearance of this unfavorable situation immediately caused the onlookers to worry, including Uncle Ying's master, Sister Chu, who had already stood up from her seat, her face full of worry. Of course, those who spontaneously expressed concern and urgency for Uncle Ying were naturally only the Chinese audience. For the group of island nation spectators and participants on the other side of the arena, this was great news. At this time, they had already begun to clamor, holding small pieces of paper painted with flags, etc. They waved them back and forth, cheering loudly for their own as the person involved. Uncle Ying naturally noticed the danger at this moment facing the spells and claw strikes that were constantly attacking him, as well as the continuously weakening protective shield light. He knew that he had no way to retreat and that it was time to fight desperately, so, a look of determination flashed across his face, and he quickly bit his tongue. Quickly holding the great sword upright in front of his chest at the same time, he formed a hand seal, and spiritual light suddenly appeared in his palm. With his index and middle fingers pointing directly at the center of his eyebrows, slowly, he began to close his eyes, his expression solemn, and he recited loudly, "As long as you suffer a loss, the thought arises in your heart, true divine art, the 8 great marshals display their supernatural powers, Mr. 9 Marcus may be drunk, but he also knows the east, west, north, and south winds. Disciple looks up at the blue sky, with all the ancestral masters by my side. I respectfully invite the ancestral master to possess me. I respectfully invite the ancestral master to possess me. I respectfully invite the ancestral master to possess me." As the incantation in his mouth was constantly recited, basically every time he recited a sentence, Uncle Ying would follow it up by stomping his foot heavily on the ground until smoke and dust rose, soil debris flew, and a small pit was stomped out of the compacted ground under his feet, and a trace of pure blood energy began to flow out of his mouth above the sky. The light that had originally become dim due to the gathering of winds and clouds actually changed accordingly. A beam of golden light suddenly shone down. The golden light seemed to appear out of thin air, as if it came from another dimensional space. Falling from the high sky, it directly penetrated the dark clouds above the arena, covering Uncle Ying below. The next moment, a strange lightning bolt followed closely behind the light, directly striking the top of Uncle Ying's head. It seemed to be exceptionally swift, but it did not injure even a single hair of Uncle Ying himself. As if it was just an illusion, this entire process seemed a little strange. It clearly happened before everyone's eyes, able to be observed by everyone present. But it seemed slow and fast, as if time had stopped at this moment. Themin, who was fiercely attacking with his claws, threw with a murderous look on his face, the fireballs flying with dancing flames, the hailstones drifting with cold air, the little girl in the audience seats with her hands clasped tightly in front of her chest, the island nation spectators with saliva flying and lips and teeth flying, Yuan Datao on the podium gripping the armrest of the chair and wiping his eyes, including Liang Yue, who was holding a teacup with a focused expression, and even everyone present, were frozen there at this moment. Boom! The next moment, a burst of scattered golden smoke suddenly erupted from Uncle Ying's body. It seemed turbulent, but it was not able to stir up a trace of dust or debris. But Themin, who was originally waving his claws and attacking fiercely, was blasted away in an instant. Then, Uncle Ying, who had originally closed his eyes, slowly opened his eyes. With the golden divine light restrained within, his appearance was still the same as before, but Uncle Ying's expression, demeanor, and even his entire temperament and charm had all undergone earth-shattering changes in silence transcendent. Indifferent to all beings, modest and gentle, heroic and outstanding, his entire body seemed to have never been stained with a trace of dust, like a pure and boundless cloud, free and unfettered between heaven and earth. Facing Themin, who had fallen in front of him, and the island nation in the back, Uncle Ying curled the corners of his mouth at this moment, revealing a smile. The great sword that was originally held upright was simply waved lightly, as if he was just wiping away the dust in front of him with a whisk. Gently and naturally, an extremely subtle and extremely condensed sword energy was then unleashed. Themin and Thetans of meters away in the back were split in two almost simultaneously in just an instant. Neither the hard claws and skin, nor the protective magical instruments surrounding their bodies, could stop it in the slightest. As fresh blood splattered, the golden light that had fallen from the sky actually began to narrow, shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye in the blink of an eye. Only a line of light remained. Seeing this at this moment, the originally indifferent eyes of Uncle Ying also changed, and a trace of strangeness quietly disappeared. Then, a faint golden light and shadow flew out from the top of his head. Chasing after the golden light above, in an instant, it disappeared from the sight of everyone present. Chapter 529 Message from the Patriarch. Senior brother, since your divine striking technique is so powerful, why didn't you use it from the start? Is the divine striking technique something you can use recklessly? That thing drains a lot of energy. Like now, I won't be able to return to perfect state for at least half a year. I'll need to recuperate properly during this time. Alice, in the end, I was still a bit careless. Who would have thought that the Shikigami brought by that Japanese mage would be so powerful? Even a lightning spell couldn't kill him. That must be close to 700 or 800 years of cultivation. If I had known, senior brother, you should have brought a few 100-year-old zombies to guard the place. It would be best if you had a 1,000-year-old zombie. That demon ghost from just now definitely couldn't stop it. Don't talk nonsense. In broad daylight, under the bright sky, how can you control zombies under the sun? Soon, with the support of Auntie Che, the two senior and junior siblings bickered all the way back to the contestant area. Staggering as they walked, what awaited them was naturally a series of compliments and congratulations from everyone present. Seeing Uncle Nine's pale and weak appearance at this moment, Liang Yue directly flipped his sleeve and took out a bottle of ancient fruit wine from his storage space. After prying open the bottle stopper, he took a teacup from the side, and then, while pouring wine, he said, "This is medicinal wine brewed by this one using rare exotic fruits. It can be used to replenish vitality, recuperate injuries, and incidentally remove some strange curse techniques." Smelling the rich aroma of wine wafting from the cup in front of him, Uncle Nine forced a smile at him, then picked it up and took a symbolic sip. Who knew that he, who originally had no hope in his heart, was suddenly jolted awake? His pair of lazy, sleepy eyes instantly lit up accompanying the sip of wine. In an instant, a cool sensation seemed to directly surge into his bone marrow, traveling throughout his body, and then rising to the brain, dispelling the sleepiness from his body completely. Immediately afterwards, this coolness actually transformed into strands of warm medicinal power, just like steam rising within the body, constantly nourishing and moisturizing his body with a gentle fire. Just this small sip of wine could exert such an effect. Looking at the deep blue liquid in the cup, Uncle Nine almost popped his eyes out. Afterwards, he no longer hesitated and directly drank the remaining wine in the cup in one gulp, swallowing it all down his throat like he was devouring a whole jujube. After finishing, he finally let out a long sigh, as if relieved of a heavy burden. With a relaxed and joyful expression, his face glowing, there was no trace of his previous injured, haggard, and kidney-deficient appearance. Afterwards, under the surprised gaze of the surrounding people, Uncle Nine hurriedly straightened his clothes and cupped his fist at Liang Yue with a grateful expression. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Liang, for your generous gift. This cup of wine actually directly restored me by 70 or 80%. I imagine this medicinal wine must be very precious, right?" Seeing this, Liang Yue smiled lightly and poured another cup for the other party, saying, "Just some external possessions, not worth mentioning." After finishing, this guy took the wine bottle, turned his head, and poured a cup for the Shaolin old monk who was sitting beside him looking at him expectantly, and continued earlier, I saw that Master won so easily, I forgot to pour a cup for Master as well. I'm truly guilty. He fellow Taoist Liang is too polite. This old monk is now, after all, getting old, and can compare to the prime of life of everyone present. Then I won't stand on ceremony saying so. The old monk was also not polite at all, smilingly picked it up, and savoringly sipped the wine. He didn't mention anything about the Buddhist precepts or anything like that. Alice, great kindness needs no thanks. Fellow Taoist Liang, if there is anything I can help with in the future, just let me know. I usually cultivate in XXX. As long as there is something, just send a message over. I will definitely not dare to shirk it in the slightest. No need to be so polite. How about this? I will now place this bottle of wine here. Next, no matter which fellow Taoist comes on stage to compete, they can freely take it after returning to replenish their injuries. Fellow Taoist Liang is generous. After a series of compliments, the atmosphere in the arena gradually became harmonious. In addition, after winning all 5 rounds in this exchange meeting, the Chinese adepts had already gained a great advantage, so everyone's mentality could not help but become more relaxed. Even Uncle Nine, who originally had a serious face, was not good at talking, and had a slightly unapproachable appearance, took the initiative to speak and tell others about his previous adventures. Speaking of which, this time I used the divine striking technique under duress. Although it consumed a lot of energy, upon careful calculation, I also gained blessings because of it. Oh? Where does fellow Taoist's blessing come from? Could it be that after being possessed by my Taoist ancestor, you found an opportunity for a breakthrough? Speaking of which, the ancestor that Taoist Lin summoned earlier should be Ancestor Lu. Right, it is indeed pure Yang true man, Ancestor Lu. This time, after being possessed by him, although there was some loss, when he was about to leave, Ancestor Lu also felt that it was not easy for this younger disciple to cultivate. He specially left a few unique sword techniques for me, which are extremely profound. If I can sort them out and comprehend them, I will definitely benefit endlessly. Haha. Fellow Taoist Lin actually has such an opportunity. Not only did he have his old man personally descend to eliminate demons, but he was also bestowed with an unparalleled inheritance. Actually, it's just a few sword techniques and mantras. Saying it's an unparalleled inheritance is a bit too much. Not so. Fellow Taoist is a high-achieving disciple of the Maotian lineage. I am an orthodox Quanzhen disciple, a direct disciple of the Lu ancestors' lineage, and I still don't have it all right. Before returning to the upper realm, Ancestor Lu also said something to me. What else did his old man say? He said that the celestial phenomena have changed, and within the next 20 or 30 years, the land of China may suffer from war. We outsiders cannot stay out of the world either, and we must help the people and try our best to drive away the invading enemies. Is this true? This is the word of the ancestor. How dare I, as a Taoist disciple, make any false statements? If that's the case, this matter. I'm afraid we still have to wait a few days and report it to the sect first. Not bad. I think just as the people in the contestant area were chatting enthusiastically in their seats, the people on the rostrum were also experiencing a different kind of conversation. Yuan Datao was still sitting leisurely in the high main seat, with a bit of smugness in his expression, vaguely with a bit of smug look, looking at the island country representative below. I see. Why don't we just call it quits? Now, this exchange competition is already halfway through. In the 5 matches, the winners are all adepts from my China, and your side has also suffered losses and heavy casualties because of this. If we continue to compete like this, it's not very interesting. The envoys from various countries are watching from the side. If we continue like this, we will inevitably be labeled as bullying the small. We will never agree to stop this competition. Even if all the adepts from our island nation are sacrificed at that time, there will be no cowards who flee before the battle. Hearing this, the representative from the island country immediately looked at Yuan Datao with a black face, his expression firm and resolute. Then why don't we wait until the afternoon to compete again? It will also give the adepts from the island nation some time to adjust. By the way, let's level and tidy up this competition field as well. Look how messy it is now. No need. Under any harsh conditions, we on the island nation side are ready to fight to the end. Chapter 530 Island Mushishi. This is the 6th match of the Sino-Japanese Exchange Tournament. Representing China is Daoshi. Representing Japan is Mushiichi. Following the loud announcement from the gray-haired elder on the podium, the 6th match began on the Chinese side. Daoshi, needless to say, refers to the 2 direct disciples of the Quanzhen Taoist sect leaders. Upon hearing their code names, The two fellow disciples exchanged playful winks, huddled together for a brief discussion, and ultimately decided that the elder brother, Wang Zuanhe, would go first to this end. The two even sparked a brief argument. Anyone who didn't know better would have thought they were genuinely eager to serve their country. The one who came on stage from the Japanese side was a scruffy young man with a somewhat dull look in his eyes and a slightly unsteady gait. Dressed in a riot of colors, with strands of messy hair hanging down, obscuring most of his face. However, in Liang Yu's eyes, the other party's appearance and age were naturally undisguised. Mushiichi, a bug master, through the vision of his Tensigen, Liang Yue easily discovered a large number of insects on the other party's body, on his clothes, in his hair, in the dirt under his fingernails, and even in seemingly impossible places like his ear canals and chest cavity. Among these insects, some were creatures from the natural world, various small mosquitoes, fleas, beetles, etc., and some were abnormal creatures. At this moment, they were exhibiting a translucent state, like ghostly bacteria, with various bizarre shapes, surrounding the person's body, which was generally difficult for ordinary people to detect. Is this a method similar to the goo driving techniques of southern Xinjiang? This path of cultivation is quite rare. Looking at the other party's strange state of human-insect symbiosis, Liang Yue couldn't help but stroke his chin, marveling in his heart. Although he had seen other masters who played with insects in the previous Naruto world, compared to the insect-type ninjas of the ninja world, the Japanese bugmaster on the opposite side seemed to have gone even further on this path. I wonder who created such a bizarre cultivation path. However, looking at the man's appearance of being oblivious to the world, as if he had long forgotten worldly affairs, although Liang Yue was also very curious about this, he could only make limited observations and understanding at most to really ask this guy to seriously cultivate this path. He really couldn't bring himself to do it. Too disgusting. It really is. I respectfully invite the ancestor to possess my body. After 3 consecutive shots of different intensity, another golden light suddenly descended from the sky and landed on Wang Zuanhe in the arena below. Yes, this brother, from the very beginning of the competition, from the moment he just stood on the arena, unhesitatingly used the divine striking technique, and then summoned his own ancestor to possess him. Regarding this, although the crowd in the contestant seats was a little surprised, after thinking about it, the other party's behavior was still reasonable. As for Liang Yue, from the very beginning, he had already guessed what the other party was thinking. After all, there was Uncle Ying as an example in front of him. Summoning the ancestor to descend to the world and possess him can not only greatly increase the odds of winning and enhance one's own combat power, but also directly kill the opponent with a high probability afterwards. There was also the medicinal wine provided by Liang Yue, used to eliminate weakness and nourish the body, which could almost be said to be without any worries. Then, if you were lucky, during this process, you could also be like Uncle Ying before, and be bestowed with a trick or two of inheritance from your own ancestor, and receive the instruction from the immortal elder from the upper realm, such a good thing that can be said to be a sure profit, since it has already been placed in front of you. What reason is there to miss it? As the saying goes, if heaven grants something and you don't take it, you will suffer the consequences. If the time comes and you don't act, you will suffer the disaster. Liang Yue had already guessed that ever since Uncle Ying told others about his experience of using the divine striking technique, someone would definitely imitate him at that time. Seeing the undisguised envy on the faces of the two disciples from Kwanzaa Taoism, and a hint of indignation, after hearing that Uncle Ying had received guidance and some inheritance from pure Yang Zhenren, Liang Yue knew the next game will probably directly enter the garbage time. After all, China is an ancient and long-standing land. Taoism as a long-standing and profound inheritance system in this land, even if one's own sect is only a branch of this inheritance, in this long river of time. Who cannot have a few great supernatural powers, and ancestors who have already been listed in the immortal class? Those sects that are not well known and have no inheritance are not qualified to receive the invitation sent by Yuan Da Tao, unless the contestant who is drawn is not from the Taoist lineage. For example, Tangman, Beggar Gang, Northeast Outing Immortals, etc. As for Buddhism, I don't know for the time being. Therefore, from the moment he was possessed by his ancestor, the competition in the arena had already lost its suspense. Even if the one who appeared from the island country at this time was a mysterious and unpredictable alien cultivator, in the next moment, a raging fire rose in the arena, engulfing every corner of the arena almost instantly. What was burned by this raging flame, in addition to the mess in the arena, was also the translucent sea of insects that had unknowingly spread over dozens of meters, as well as the bugmaster himself and the wailing and screams of a group of insects. The bugmaster on the opposite side only lasted for less than 10 seconds, and then turned into a pile of ashes along with the insect swarm afterwards. A spiritual light rushed out from Wang Zuanhei's body, and disappeared into the distant sky along with a golden light shining down at the moment when the divine striking technique was lifted. Wang Zuanhei in the arena almost fell to the arena due to excessive consumption and mental trance. Fortunately, he reacted in time, immediately braced himself to stop his soft and sore body, and then slowly returned to his seat with the support of his junior brother, who rushed up then, under the diligent greetings, pouring wine and passing cups, and carrying inquiries from the people around him. Wang Zuanhei picked up the ancient fruit wine at hand and drank it in one gulp, and then arched his hands at the surrounding people with a look of relief, and told about his previous experience. Finally, this trip was not in vain. The one who descended on me just now was my family's Chongyang ancestor. In addition to passing on to the disciple a hand of Yan'yang fire-driving technique, I also left some instructions and entrustments, which are similar to what Taoist Jiufang said before, clearly indicating that we Chinese Taoist alien people should strive for self-improvement and expel the Tartars. We must not let foreigners come to harm our China. Wow! In this way, wouldn't we be equivalent to having a way to temporarily communicate with the ancestors in the upper realm? Well, this matter is still thanks to Taoist Liang's medicinal wine. That's right, this medicinal wine must be priceless. I think there will not be many opportunities left for us to communicate with the ancestors. Who is next? Well, Beggar Gang, Tingman, and the brothers from the Northeast Immortal Sect. Do you have any? Chapter 531 Phantom Sea? Compared to the religious traditions such as Taoism and Buddhism have a long history and have always occupied an important position in the long development of China, and have also had an important influence on the character shaping of people on this land. The Beggar clan and Tang clan are relatively pure Jianghu sects, although they also occupy a pivotal position in the other world and among some ordinary people in their respective fields of expertise. They also have a weight no less than the former. However, when it comes to the influence on Chinese civilization and secular culture, these Jianghu factions cannot catch up with the religious traditions, no matter how hard they try. After all, people only ever talk about how a certain immortal Taoist lord, patriarch, or Buddha is in the upper realm, and what position and glory they hold, but rarely do people talk about what kind of status and respect a hegemon among beggars, or a top figure in hidden weapons and poison arts, has in the immortal realm. At most, it is only limited to their own sect. In this case, if you want to use promotion methods such as divine striking technique, and ask for help from higher level people to seek protection, you can naturally forget about it, even if there are really some people outside of religious sects who accidentally learn this kind of technique, and then reluctantly risk cast it. But in the case where there is no one at the top of their own sect, they will inevitably attract the descent of some evil gods. At that time, even the caster's own body may be occupied, creating a situation where it is easy to invite a god but difficult to send it away. A little carelessness may lead to endless harm. As for the shamanic immortal lineage, which is mainly active in northeast China, it is quite special in this regard. In Liang Yue's view, the method in this sect of using alien intelligent creatures to assist in combat and increase combat power is actually quite unique. It can barely be regarded as an alien version of the divine striking technique. From the beginning of cultivation, the body has been lent to a certain fixed demon spirit. In this case, if you were to cast some kind of divine striking technique again, let alone use it to fight against the enemy, it would be good if the two existences didn't start fighting on the spot. Therefore, aside from Buddhism and Taoism, even if those other types of sects know that they have now encountered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, it can be said that the timing, location, and people are all right, but at this time, they can only stare blankly from the sidelines, and besides envy, it is just adding to their troubles. This time, the seventh match of the China-Japan Exchange Tournament. The Chinese side is represented by Dark One. The Japanese side is represented by Sword 2. Soon, another exchange tournament arrived as scheduled on the Chinese side. The so-called Dark One naturally refers to the Tang clan. There was once a saying in the other world, rather meet Yama than provoke a Tang clan member. It is said that this sect's inheritance has terrifying hidden weapon skills and poison techniques. Any otherworlder, once they confront this group, they must be very careful and cautious, otherwise, a little carelessness may directly lead to their death, or even not know how they died. And the Sword 2 on the Japanese side refers to the second-rank swordsman among all the Japanese contestants. Those who can be personally selected by the Japanese emperor must be strong. However, as a swordsman who mainly focuses on offense, he happened to encounter a direct disciple of the Tang clan's head, and I don't know whether to say he's lucky or extremely unlucky, at least in the eyes of Liang Yue and others. This Sword 2 should be the one who is just restrained. Thus so the final result of the match was just as everyone expected. Although this swordsman from Japan was indeed not weak, his way of using the sword was a bit like the male protagonist in Rurouni Kenshin. And he himself was quite handsome. Various swift movements, positioning, rotations, jumps, sharp and swift sword techniques, and occasionally he could split out a few sharp sword energies from the katana in his hand, but he didn't do enough in terms of defense. Knowing that he was fighting against someone from the Tang clan, he never used true energy to protect his body, or used sword energy and various defensive techniques to protect himself from beginning to end. So, with this kind of fighting style, the ending was actually doomed from the beginning. In this match, the battle between the two sides lasted only less than half a minute. And the Sortu contestant from Japan directly succumbed to the poison on the spot and collapsed to the ground immediately afterwards. Tang Xiazan of the Tang clan pierced his brow with a flying needle. The 8th match of this exchange tournament. The Chinese side is represented by Tao 3. The Japanese side is represented by Ghost 1. This battle still had no surprises because that Tao 3 refers to the inheritance of Wudang Mountain. Although compared to other Taoist sects, the history of Wudang's establishment and rise seems a bit short. No one has ever doubted the strength of this lineage. However, compared to his unusually active luck attribute, Liang Yue was actually more interested in the spirit one on the Japanese side at this time. To be precise, he was interested in a shining ball light in the opponent's body at this time. Liang Yue's opponent was a young and beautiful woman. She had an amazing appearance, a slightly short figure, but a perfect proportion. And her pink curly hair was simply combed into a ponytail and tied behind her head. More importantly, the other party's eyes were very determined, and her whole temperament seemed particularly delicate and otherworldly. What's your name? After taking the stage, Liang Yue didn't rush to take action this time, but directly asked the other party's name. I am Genkai. The other party was obviously stunned when she heard this, and subconsciously replied, Sai, do you want to die or do you want to live? Hearing the words of the woman on the opposite side, Liang Yue immediately raised his eyebrows, feeling surprised by this answer, and in this instant, he associated a lot from the other party's name. You are too arrogant. At this time, Master Genkai, who was in her prime, immediately raised her eyebrows, looking a little angry. To be honest, I am very interested in the spirit light ball in your body, so I want to give you another choice, if you can. Liang Yue smacked his lips at this time, subconsciously considering his tone. Don't even think about it. However, Genkai on the opposite side did not give him this opportunity. Although she was a little surprised that he would know about the existence of the spirit light ball, this woman was obviously unwilling to accept any charity, let alone choose to submit. After a delicate shout, she clenched her fists and took the initiative to rush towards him. Chapter 532 Aura Ball. Facing Huan He's offensive, Liang Yue didn't use any spells or domains to fight back. Instead, he displayed his close combat abilities for the first time in this exchange meeting. Previously, when he fought Liang Yue from Japan, he wielded dual swords and defeated his opponent. With just one strike, he took the opponent's head. However, his actual combat process was too short at the time. Relying on the explosive speed, he ended the battle in an instant. As a result, everyone in the arena knew he was powerful, but they didn't have a concrete understanding of his skills at this moment. Seeing Liang Yue directly entering the arena empty-handed, many people around couldn't help but widen their eyes, showing their attention. Huan He took the initiative at this time. Even though she was 5 or 6 meters away from Liang Yue, she directly opened her mouth, which could have been called a cherry small mouth, opened wide in an instant, and a nearly solidified sonic wave spewed out. From this sonic wave, Liang Yue clearly felt an abnormal spiritual power fluctuation. Obviously, this should be some kind of energy application technique similar to the lion's roar of Shaolin, which can produce miraculous effects when fighting against the enemy. Unfortunately, the opponent's preemptive offensive, although considered sudden, was far from hitting Liang Yue. Liang Yue at this moment, without any movement on his body, strangely moved more than 10 meters away in an instant. The next moment, a purple glow suddenly flashed from the root of his leg, propelling him. He shot forward at an incredible angle, just like a beam of purple light being refracted in the arena. Its breaking was straight, but the root showed an acute angle, directly towards Huan He. In front facing her was a simple straight punch. Bang! Facing Liang Yue's attack, which could be described as instantaneous, this woman didn't seem to react at all and was instantly knocked away. However, Liang Yue didn't use any extra force on his fist, only using the speed and inertia of the swift meteor to deliver the blow. Therefore, although Huan He was flying backward, she quickly adjusted her balance after landing. She still maintained a defensive posture with her arms crossed. She slid 7 or 8 meters away on the solid ground, plowing out 2 deep marks with her feet. However, in the next moment, Liang Yue didn't continue to show mercy. The whole person was like a magnet, closely following her like a shadow. After the woman landed, he grabbed her crossed arms with a slight force. He pressed her head, along with her arms, directly into the ground. Duang. Liang Yue was still standing on the field, taking advantage of his height, holding Huan He's arms in one hand, lifting her into the air at this time. Although there were no scars on the woman's body, her head was lowered and her body was soft. Her body swayed slightly with Liang Yue's movements, and she had at least passed out. The next moment, Liang Yue casually threw her to one side of the arena. Huan He immediately drew a high parabola in the air and was finally caught in the arms of a female contestant in the Japanese contestant area winner. China. Dao Yi. Soon, after Liang Yue returned to his rest area, the last game followed closely. The two sides in the competition were the Chumaxan sect from the northeast and the Japanese player codenamed Yin Yang 3. In the end, the result of the game didn't produce any surprises, and China still won. Although the process of the battle was slightly tortuous, the strength gap between the two sides seemed to be very small, so the process of this game was quite intense, comparable to the previous battle between Uncle Ying and another Japanese on Meiji. But in the end, the Chumaxan sect player, with the help of his contracted monster, a monster snake with powerful demon power, won the final game. Moreover, the demon snake directly swallowed the Shikigami summoned by the Japanese on Meiji into its stomach. At the end, at this point, this exchange meeting between China and Japan finally came to a successful conclusion. Yuan Datao was also very satisfied with the results of the competition. His face was full of complacency, and he had a smiling face when he saw anyone. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh loudly in front of the Japanese representatives, unable to close his mouth. Yuan Datao was so happy, and what followed was naturally a grand reception. More than 1,000 people in the audience, except for the group of Japanese who left early. None of them could escape taking advantage of the wide arena to hold it on the spot. Soon, a team of thousands of people walked quickly between the seats with delicious food. All kinds of delicacies, and Chinese and foreign wines are almost endless. It's another waste of money, taking advantage of today's great victory. The Chinese celebrities present were also very appetite. They called friends and gathered with their acquaintances, singing loudly, and laughter was endless. A banquet lasted until 3 or 4 in the afternoon before people began to leave one after another. However, Liang Yue and others, as contestants, naturally didn't leave so quickly. Aside from Liang Yue's warm invitation after the game, inviting everyone present to his mansion for a gathering, planning to take advantage of this rare opportunity to communicate with the elite disciples of many inheritance schools in the alien world, and even exchange what they have. Yuan Datao, as the initiator of this China-Japan exchange meeting and the convener of many elite people in the Chinese alien world, naturally has a lot to communicate with them, not to mention any personal wishes such as heartfelt wooing and recruiting, and some excessive ambitions at the very least. So many people with supernatural powers present, regardless of the hard work, gathered here from all over the world, and now they risk their lives to help you, Yuan Datao, win this game. And in your perfect posture under this circumstance, how can you, as the current president of China, have no expression at all? Although the elite disciples of those famous inheritance schools, and a considerable number of casual groups, came here just to contribute to the country, be loyal, and incidentally beat the Japanese devils to make a name for themselves, it doesn't necessarily mean that they came for Yuan Datao. But in the end, in the current time period, the two are actually the same thing. No matter how many people will accept the other party's gift afterwards, whether you want it or not is one thing, whether you give it or not is another. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 533, Spirit Light Wave Fist. Night. Leaving behind the hustle and bustle of the day, Liang Yue had already brought Xiao Zhao and Anna back home for the contestants of this exchange meeting. The real celebration banquet was scheduled for the evening 3 days later. Obviously, after winning this Sino-Japanese ability exchange competition, Yuan Datao still had many things to arrange. Although, in terms of the country's industrialization process, the level of national education, and so on, Huaxia was indeed much behind the island country at this time. However, The results of today's competition between the two countries were enough to convey a clear signal to the spectators present at the time that Huaxia is not as weak as imagined, especially in terms of high-end combat power. It can still absolutely crush the surrounding small countries. Needless to say, once such information about national strength and power balance appears, it will soon be conveyed back to their own country by the many foreign envoys present imperceptibly. Many things will be adjusted and changed accordingly, and Yuan Datao, as an ambitious man determined to climb to a higher position, obviously understands this principle. Therefore, in the next period of time, he will become very busy with propaganda, busy with showing off, busy with taking advantage of the situation, busy with arranging procedures, busy with ascending to the highest position. Unfortunately, although overthrowing the Tartar Qin dynasty is an indelible and destined to be recorded in history great achievement, judging from the current international and domestic situation, this achievement alone will definitely not allow him to achieve his goals smoothly and naturally, since he can't even win over the public. How can he expect more? This thing seems to be very unusual. There is a sharp fluctuation, not just a simple energy aggregate, that's right, and it looks like the energy level of this thing is not low. It can also be used as a guide to obtain the ability to cultivate this spiritual power, and you can also get the Liang Yue fist hidden in it. However, this energy is a bit overbearing in nature. Its recipient must exercise their body to a certain level to be safe and sound. In general, this energy is not bad. Similar to the chakra of the Hyuga family, the effect of direct use is the best, but it is difficult to use to launch attribute ninjutsu such as water, fire, wind, and thunder, and it does not have much benefit to the human body. Even if you practice to a high level, you may not be able to prolong your life, In that case, wouldn't this Liang ball seem very useless? Useless not necessarily, after all, it still has many advantages in itself. If it can be slightly combined with other cultivation systems, it should also be a good direction. By the magma furnace, Liang Yue was now surrounded by the girls, commenting and expressing their opinions on a palm-sized sphere in the middle that was releasing thousands of milky white pure rays of light. This Liang ball was naturally taken out of Huan Hei's body by him during the competition during the day. At that time, under the cover of smoke and dust, Liang Yue directly used the move of virtualization to grab the spiritual ball in his hand. It is said to be a Liang ball, but the main body of this thing is actually a special jade stone, can be used as a container for spiritual power storage. It's just that the energy saturation inside this jade stone is very high, and it has even reached the point of penetrating the body, so from the outside, it looks more like a ball. Holding it in your hand feels like holding a sea urchin, with a slight tingling sensation, but that's all according to the setting in the original plot of Yu Yu Hakusho. Huan Hei reached a late stage of her life. Although she was recognized as the #1 spiritual power cultivator in the island country, however, her final achievement was only at the level of a B-level mid-level monster. On the contrary, his junior brother Taguro, although he had never received the inheritance of the Liang Jade, successfully advanced to the level of a B-level high-level monster after choosing to become a demon, and by this, he got rid of the limitations of the human body and gained the long lifespan of a demon. Relying on his strong body and muscle control ability, he can still kill Huan Hei, who has top-notch spiritual power cultivation. It can be seen that the inheritance of the Liang Jade and the Liang Wave Fist is very good, but it is not a top-notch one. Later, Yuasuke Urameshi, the protagonist of Yu Yu Hakusho, although he achieved very high achievements and was ranked as an S-class demon beast, however, the Liang Wave Fist and the Lingli inheritance are actually only responsible for guiding him on the road to evolution. The vast majority of his strength, in the final analysis, still comes from the blood of the great demon king of the previous life in his body. But even so, speaking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but scan the girls around him, and finally stopped on Hinata. Chunkyu is planning to let me practice this spiritual power. Feeling his gaze, Hinata quickly understood, and a bit of expectation suddenly appeared on her delicate face. Yes, if it can be used correctly, it can be used to make up for the lack of chakra potential and the unclear future since signing a contract with Liang Yue, coming to the stronghold world with him, and breaking away from the limitations of Naruto's corner in one fell swoop. Although Hinata's strength has been steadily increasing, it is only due to the bonuses of different systems such as professionals and magicians. Although they are all getting stronger, the chakra that this woman had been painstakingly cultivating for many years has been delayed because of this. In Liang Yue's view, this is a typical manifestation of putting down his main practice and turning his energy to other exquisite moves. It is indeed a bit of abandoning the basics. Fortunately, The professional route does not contaminate the cultivator's own energy operation and is relatively independent. The inheritance path of magicians cultivates the upper dantian of the human body, which is the position of the eyebrows, and it will not occupy the lower dantian of the cultivator, but the problem is that is the chakra that occupies in its main position. Although this energy itself is very strong, there are indeed many problems. Liang Yue had wanted to help in it a change of practice method to practice more than once. Unfortunately, he has not been able to find a suitable replacement at this time. This spiritual power inheritance, which also comes from the lineage of the island country, made him see hope. This unique energy, pure and domineering, is very close in nature to the chakra of the Hyuga family, and can be connected in many special aspects. Of course, what Liang Yue is thinking at this time is not just a simple replacement. Fusion is the most perfect solution. After all, with a jade in front of the system, wouldn't it be too low level to consider simply abolishing the martial arts and installing a new one? However, without the help of the system, it is indeed not an easy task to combine the two abilities into one. This matter really needs to be carefully considered and prepared before making plans. Chapter 534: A Big Fish. For Liang Yue and the others, exploring how to safely and effectively integrate and utilize the aura sphere was actually a time-consuming project. They had to set aside time, find a secluded place, and calm down to ponder it properly. However, the current Liang Yue couldn't spare the effort to earnestly seclude himself for deep contemplation, whether it was regarding the matters of the human mother box, or other planned arrangements. He had to make deployments as soon as possible. Therefore, after handing the ball to Hinata and asking her to temporarily familiarize herself with the nature of this energy, Liang Yue turned around and released the ghost god that he had condensed into a ball from his Tensen core in space well. Its current state was no longer that of a ball. It seemed that this ghost god indeed had some tricks up its sleeve. After breaking free from the weakened version of the planetary devastation gravity field, it had now transformed into a ghoul about 2 meters tall. It had all the facial features and limbs, a single horn growing on its forehead, wore a simple yet heavy suit of armor, and silver flames floated around its body, ferocious yet carrying a hint of imposingness. It looked quite impressive. Tell me, besides being able to use soul power to strengthen equipment and temporarily amplify combat power, what else can you do? On one side of the lava furnace, Liang Yue and the others were currently arranged in a semicircle. A dozen or so people sitting seemingly casually on chairs, their eyes fixed on the ghost god opposite the furnace. Without blinking, an invisible aura, mixed with many layers, had completely locked onto the opponent. Besides this, Liang Yue, this guy, had even directly set up a special gravitational field around the courtyard, and also put a layer of mirror space around it a little further away in order to bargain with this ghost god. Liang Yue could be said to have exhausted all means I can impart to you, the ghost clan's secret combat skills. Upon hearing this, the ghost god's eyes flickered with the ghostly fire a few times, and then it spoke in an awkward island nation accent that seemed to be a way of communication that touched the soul. So that although the two sides spoke different languages, it did not hinder normal communication. Of course, for Liang Yue and the others who had the language mastery skill, it was actually just superfluous. I already knew those. Say something I don't know. Think carefully before you speak. This is related to your future treatment, and whether you can survive in my hands. Hearing the other party's words, Liang Yue smiled slightly, the corners of his mouth curving into a cruel arc under the illumination of the firelight. He was faintly endowed with a kind of eerie flavor. You, how can you let me leave? After all, it was a negotiation. How could he reveal his purpose without clearly understanding the other party's depth? And the concept of satisfaction in his mouth was actually very vague in its boundaries. The specific standard was entirely up to Liang Yue himself to control. I can also give you a precious soul cultivation method. After reaching a certain stage, your soul can produce devouring and absorbing soul power ability, and don't worry, there will be no side effects. Then you can become this ghostly look. You don't trust me? I also have no way. I can only guarantee that cultivation method is my ghost clan, passed down from generation to generation. Secret technique. Trust. Well, if we're talking about trust, I do have a way to try you out. What method? Let's sign a contract. At least it can add an insurance to our cooperation. Can at this time, there was indeed a lack of trust between Liang Yue and this ghost god. On the end, the relationship between the two parties was at most a relationship of coercion and being coerced. Even the races were different. Where did the trust come from? As for the contract that Liang Yue mentioned, alright, in fact, regarding this kind of mysterious thing, from beginning to end, he would only believe in one kind, that was the contract under the system association. Therefore, What Liang Yue wanted to sign with the other party at this time was naturally the villager contract under system certification. Then you wait, I'll find it first. After saying that, Liang Yue moved his mind and summoned his villager contract interface. Flipped to the DC world item frame, and then searched for the one belonging to the ghost god opposite in the dense pile of character information bars. About half a minute later, he finally found the information about the other party in a corner. A member of the fallen old gods, now in a state of extreme injury and weakness. Sure enough, I had already guessed that the other party's identity would not be simple. I didn't expect it to really be a god. What ghost clan? What ghost god? Ghost warrior? It turned out to be just a guise. However, how did such an existence run to that ghostly place in the island nation? Speaking of, if it's just targeting its disability, the system should be able to handle it, right? Never mind. Being able to encounter such a one can also be considered a profit. Give it to me. In the blink of an eye, Liang Yue tried his best to suppress the excitement in his heart, and with a flamboyant orchid finger, he stabbed the invitation button in front of him fiercely. In the next moment, the ghost god opposite him also followed with a tremor. Obviously, having received the information sent by the system afterwards, the two sides fell into a silent confrontation. This ghost god was obviously hesitating because, according to the women around Liang Yue, this villager contract sent by the system was actually extremely simple. Besides a bar marked with agree and reject, it didn't show any other content terms at all as a contract. This was obviously extremely unfair. After all, as the signing party, they couldn't even see the specific content of this contract besides the system. Where else was there such a hegemonic clause? The ghost god opposite was a transcendent being that had existed for who knows how many years, presumably also a person with extensive knowledge, obviously also knowing the ways of this. In this situation, it would be a ghost if it could agree without hesitation. However, as a former old god, no matter what kind of glory and status it had in the past, the other party's current identity was just a prisoner who was extremely weak. The choices left for it were not many, and saying it was a choice. In fact, Liang Yue only left this ghost god with the right to gamble with himself, and in order to add a positive energy to the other party's decision, someone then directly opened this thunder fire wood domain. Thunder, fire, wood, the three elemental attributes were fully opened, surrounding the small courtyard at this time. Then slowly, bit by bit, it contracted and squeezed towards the ghost god opposite. Thus finally, about 5 minutes later, when the violent lightning containing the power of heavenly tribulation was about to approach within 3 meters of the ghost god's body, Liang Yue finally ushered in the other party's compromise with anticipation and a sigh containing vicissitudes and emotion. Another powerful member besides his mother was finally welcomed into someone's villager team. So, you are in existence from outside this multiverse. The information flow brought by the villager contract and shared skills did not seem to bring much trouble to this former old god, although it couldn't compare to Liang Yue's mother's initial state, who only frowned slightly before ending the whole process. But this ghost god, in an extremely weak state, only recovered to normal after digesting it for a short tens of seconds. This kind of receiving ability was definitely something that Liang Yue could not reach now. However, feeling the emotional fluctuations of accident and surprise that were faintly emanating from the other party's body at this time, Liang Yue felt that it should also be very satisfied with its current villager status. In this way, there is no trust issue between us, right? Of course. Chapter 535 Animisha. The value of this old god before him is self-evident. Even though he is currently in a state of extreme weakness and severe injury, unable to exert much combat power, and as a former god, he is also a little afraid of death. But even without calculating the combat power factor, just focusing on the various cosmic information, cultivation knowledge, and even understanding of the rules of heaven and earth that he has mastered and accumulated in his long life, this old fellow's value is absolutely far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Putting aside everything else, just look at the abilities he displayed in the Animisha plot. He can grant others the ability to absorb and store soul power, and use it to strengthen equipment, consume soul power to temporarily and significantly enhance one's own combat power, various combat skills like ice, and then there's using soul power to replenish health and mana, condensing corresponding soul stones that can be used to increase health and mana bars, creating special life forms like Owl, and designing exclusive equipment and outer garments for them that can unleash various attributes. Most importantly, he can also perform space-time transfer through some means. This is much more awesome than Liang Yue's current ability to draw a circle in the air, open a door, and perform simple space transfer at the same time. This is also the reason why Liang Yue set up multiple protective measures at the beginning of the negotiations between the two parties. From the setting, the other party is too slippery, and he might run away if you're not careful. But now it seems that, Due to some reasons of his own, even if this old god possesses some enviable abilities, he cannot use them arbitrarily at any time, and after becoming someone's contracted villager, Liang Yue actually has the qualifications to share several abilities from this old god and apply them to himself. Of course, if the other party's level is too high, and the difference between their realm and Liang Yue's own is too great. It is estimated that a situation like Mom's Before will occur. The information displayed is all rows and rows of question marks, making him, even if he wants to share the other party's skills and knowledge to a limited extent, can only be filled with futility and helplessness. Identity, Old God Strength. 111, Body Missing, Agility. 298 Constitution. 102, Fragmented Soul Body, Energy. 598 Bloodline, Talents, Soul Devouring. Abilities, Space Manipulation, Slow Repair, Entity Enhancement, Soul Extraction, Mech Template. Skills, Elemental Mysteries. Techniques. Status, Extremely Weak, all ability usage effects reduced by 95%. Fortunately, it's not completely invisible, at least a few can be displayed. This is probably thanks to my understanding of some of the Animisha plot, right? Moreover, it seems to be related to some of the abilities I currently possess. Forget it, who cares? As long as it works. After a not-so-intense psychological activity, Liang Yue finally calmed himself down looking at the personal information panel of Nesta, the old god who was his newly contracted villager. Liang Yue himself, along with the girls beside him, fell into deep thought for a while. The reason is self-evident. Thanks to several system upgrades, not only Liang Yue and his villagers, but even within his group of villagers, skill sharing can actually be achieved between each other, although in terms of quantity, it is definitely not as much as Liang Yue, with only one in total, but as long as it can be shared, it is already enough. Apart from some skills that have more special forms of existence and require various conditions to assist, such as magic avatars. Avatars are a more special collection of magic power. At this stage, it is difficult for the girls to condense them independently based on their realm. Even if they can occasionally succeed a few times, they cannot do it like in the skill, anytime, anywhere, whenever they want. Not to mention that after cultivating this skill to a certain stage, they have to continue to inject various attributes of magic elements into the avatars. It can be said that if you want to exert the combat power of magic avatars, having this skill is the prerequisite for everything. But aside from this type of skill with relatively large restrictions, other options in terms of various abilities, techniques, etc., can be replaced at any time, relying on everyone's increasingly powerful learning ability. Memorizing, digesting, and absorbing many of the knowledge points is only a matter of time. The skill and ability sharing mode between villagers is probably similar to the sharing mode between Liang Yue and the girls, except for the difference in quantity. They all use the link contracted by the system as a platform to upload and share one of their own abilities, and other villagers have the right to choose whether to use it or not. Since there's only one, Siko, Saya Takagi, Alwyn, Hinata, and others gradually began to engage in a fierce discussion over the next period of time. Liang Yue took advantage of this time to start another exchange with Nesta on the opposite side. The content of the discussion was roughly about how to help the other party recover from his injuries, alleviate his weakened state, and even restore Nesta to the old god's power during his peak period. However, this exchange process was a bit empty and could only be regarded as a long-term goal to be completed in stages. After all, with Liang Yue's current strength, although his combat power looks good, he is still very inexperienced when it comes to issues involving cultivation realm and even rules. It's okay to show off on Earth for the time being. But once you reach the cosmic realm, you should be low-key. But no matter what, there must always be a goal. Moreover, Nesta has now officially become a member of his Lao Liang family, and helping him recover from his injuries seems to be the due obligation of Liang Yue, the village chief. By the way, didn't you say that you can grant others a simple ability to use soul power? It's the kind that can be used to strengthen equipment, enhance combat power, and also comes with some combat skills and the like. When the discussion about long-term goals temporarily came to an end, Liang Yue suddenly changed the subject and turned the content of the exchange to Animisha. Speaking of which, when he entered the first world, Liang Yue once got a soul-absorbing bracelet from the system through a routine lottery that was an equipment from the Animisha series, which could be used to store soul power, and could also convert the absorbed yellow and blue soul power into ki and blood and mana to nourish oneself. Although Liang Yue at that time never used it in practice, but instead gave the bracelet to Siko. But this does not mean that he himself is not curious about this kind of thing. The power of Animisha? Although I think that kind of thing doesn't have much meaning for you now, but since you want to experience it as he said, Nesta on the opposite side raised one hand and waved it gently at Liang Yue from a distance, and a dazzling silver flame immediately enveloped him. After about a few seconds, the flame directly transformed into a solid object, becoming a heavy arm guard with blinking eyes, and a set of secret armor inlaid on the Taoist robe in the form of dark patterns. In addition, on the side of the lava furnace, a jade stone about the size of a disc appeared, shining with a bright glow. According to some knowledge he received in his mind, Liang Yue knew that this jade plate was the medium he used to strengthen his weapons, armor, and soul-absorbing gauntlets. Of course, the premise is that he must have a sufficient amount of soul power stored. This arm guard is too ugly. Can you change its shape? Looking at himself at this time, Liang Yue pointed at the big green eyeball that was lying on the back of his hand and blinking, and asked Nesta with a look of disgust. Of course, as soon as Nesta finished speaking, the somewhat exaggerated armor on Liang Yue's arm immediately turned into a thin, simple wrist guard similar to silk fabric. The original big eyeball directly transformed into an eyeball-shaped dark pattern that existed in the form of embroidery. At first glance, it is not eye-catching at all, and there is no difference from ordinary decorations. It looks much better now. Chapter 536 Such and Ryu Combat Technique. The events that follow need not be elaborated upon now that Liang Yue had received the Ghost Warrior's power. Fulfilling his curiosity about this profession, Siko, Saya Takagi, Yang Yue, and others around him naturally couldn't escape the same fate in the end. One by one, even Alwyn and the little hawk Rachel requested the same package. According to Nesta, when he was searching for suitable recipients of the ghost power in various parts of Japan, he harbored selfish motives. Although the ghost power could bring people power and equipment enhancements, it actually had no benefit in terms of longevity, physical evolution, or realm improvement. The so-called inheritors of the ghost power selected by Nesta were actually just laborers once the time was ripe, or when the ghost warriors peacefully reached their later years. Nesta would reappear and reclaim the gift that they had refined. It was said that this included a portion of the essence of unowned soul power, pure mental power crystals, and a small amount of life force, used to restore his own injuries and repair damaged limbs. Although Nesta's current situation was very bad, as an ancient god, lifespan and time were not of great significance to him. So, after finding some suitable people and bestowing the ghost power upon them, he wouldn't be impatient to reclaim it. This style of doing things, in an invisible way, also avoided conflicts with those ghost warriors, which allowed him to leave a fairly good reputation within Japan. It is said that in many places in Japan, people and nobles were building temples and painting portraits for him, worshipping him from time to time. But in reality, even for this ghost power package, which could almost be considered an equal exchange, Nesta had reservations. When he was in Japan, enhancing equipment and increasing combat power were okay, but the key was the so-called Ghost Clan combat skill called Isen style, which he didn't really teach. The real Isen style is actually a complete combat skill inheritance that includes combat skills, moves, footwork, and even energy cultivation and application. Nesta obviously held back when choosing inheritors of the ghost power. He only passed down a portion of the combat skills in this combat skill, with little involvement in moves and footwork, and the cultivation and application of energy were completely stripped away among them. The energy involved in this inheritance refers to the ghost power, which is the power of the soul. Yes, this Isen style combat skill is actually a precious soul type cultivation inheritance. Every transition requires the application of soul power to exert its true power. And it also has certain requirements for the soul realm and soul strength of its practitioners. When the ghost warriors cultivate this technique to a certain realm, every attack, every slash, will exercise the practitioner's own soul and the strength of their mental power. Combining combat and cultivation closely together, the effect is quite outstanding. What's different is that the previous Japanese ghost warriors, because they didn't have the correct cultivation method, could only summarize it in a long combat career. Over time, their mental will was tempered quite well. However, because they didn't have the correct method of using soul power, they could only use the soul absorbing gauntlet to indirectly use the Isen style combat skill. In this way, what they were training was naturally the soul power hidden in the soul absorbing gauntlet and the soul power enhanced equipment. Therefore, after leaving the blessing of the ghost power and the soul absorbing gauntlet, it was difficult for the ghost warriors to use the Isen style combat skill with their own power. However, the inheritance that Liang Yue and others obtained from Nesta now is different. After all, their identities are different now, and they will be partners when traveling through the heavens in the future. So how could Nesta take out that castrated inheritance to perfunctorily deal with people? Therefore, after obtaining such a powerful inheritance technique in a new field, the women were all enthusiastic for a time. and they all couldn't wait to make requests to Liang Yue. Then they returned to the stronghold world and went to the dungeon. Well, Nesta also went along. Only Shizuka and Hinata had a little conscience and chose to stay and accompany Liang Yue, of course. For the former, Shizuka-sensei, her nature of not liking combat very much is probably the reason why she chose to stay. After temporarily dealing with the affairs of the ancient god Nesta, Liang Yue immediately removed the surrounding gravitational barrier, and then cut open the mirror space, taking Shizuka and Hinata back to reality. Who knew that as soon as they landed, they found that there were guests in their small courtyard at this time. The location was still by the lava stove in Liang Yue's house at this time. A girl with pink pigtails, who looked only 17 or 18 years old, was standing there, staring blankly at a cup of hot chocolate that was still steaming on the table beside her. The visitor was Genkei. When the orange space coil reflected into the void, this woman subconsciously took half a step back, and a few traces of vigilance arose on her face. Yo, I didn't expect that there would be guests at home. Stepping out and looking at Genkei, who came uninvited, Liang Yue didn't find it surprising. After all, he had just taken away the other party's treasure of inheritance during the day. It would be strange if the other party didn't have the idea of taking it back. Spiritual light orb, in you there? Seeing Liang Yue and the others appear, Genkei lightly exhaled turbid air at this time, and asked in somewhat strange and unfamiliar Chinese, "It's with me?" Liang Yue smiled slightly at this woman when he heard this. "Return it? I'm afraid it's not possible for the time being." "Then you exactly how can return it?" "I need to take that J to do a period of research." "Research what?" "The nature of this energy, and the inheritance of your family's spirit light fluctuation fist." "Can't. That is my sex inheritance item. I must take it back." "Okay, wait until 29 years later, you come to me again, and I will definitely return it to you at that time." "What exactly do you want to do with this spirit light orb?" "That kind of thing is completely dispensable to you." That's how it is. After a short period of probing, in the time that followed, Liang Yue told Genkei his plans in front of her, and then extended an invitation to the other party. He said that as long as you help me thoroughly research this so-called spiritual energy, and successfully complete the fusion with the chakra in Hinata's body, then the time of 29 years can be reduced by a certain percentage. For this reason, Liang Yue also directly invited the other party to sit down by the stove, and had Hinata personally pour her a cup of tea afterwards. This guy gave a persuasive lecture, moving her with reason and emotion. In fact, at the beginning, Genkei refused, but the situation was stronger than people. Facing a deep and unfathomable powerhouse like Liang Yue, if she wanted to get back her family's treasure of inheritance, there were only two means: either confront him head-on, or appease and compromise. The former includes the simplest confrontation, secret theft, and the use of the intervention of a third-party force to seek it, etc. This third-party force, the most suitable, is undoubtedly the Japanese government, but once this is done, she also has no small risks, not to mention what the Republic of China would do in response to diplomatic pressure and negotiations by Japan. Even if it really succeeds, Genkei's inheritance force will inevitably be given a handle, owing the other party a favor, and afterwards, they will inevitably be driven by the Japanese officials and the royal family to go too far. The inheritance of the spirit light fluctuation fist may even be stolen and occupied by them. This move can be said to be an endless disaster, and Genkei and her sect behind her would basically not consider it unless absolutely necessary. As for the latter, the plan of appeasement and compromise, although it seems that there is no difference, in fact, it has naturally limited this matter to the two parties involved, and in the absence of middlemen making a difference, it seems more appropriate. Of course, this must also pay attention to methods and proportions. Chapter 537 Yuan Mansion Family Banquet. Unknowingly, 3 days had passed. During this time, Liang Yue, Shizuka, and Hinata, under the guidance and instruction of Genkei, roughly learned the spirit light wave fist. Since they were all beginners and already possessed skills, they learned quickly. It didn't take long before they could mobilize the spiritual power and magic power within their bodies to launch spirit balls and use various fist techniques. Of course, without the special spiritual power inherited from Genkei's lineage, their application of the spirit light wave fist naturally remained superficial. The general situation was similar to that of Kumashiro, who had learned a little Wuxiang divine art. Although they could both use it to activate the 72 Shaolin arts on the surface, it looked decent, but the essence inside was not authentic at all, and they couldn't cultivate to the original appearance of the technique's depths. However, for Liang Yue and Shizuka, this was already enough. The purpose in practicing the spirit light wave fist was only to understand the operating principle of this inheritance, and then provide themselves with more cultivation ideas. As for how much power of the original technique they could exert, it all depended on the intensity of the energy in their bodies and their own power. Simply put, as long as Liang Yue's spiritual power attribute was strong enough. A spirit ball would definitely be more interesting than the original authentic technique. Relatively speaking, Hinata's side would have to work harder, not only to skillfully master the operation of the spirit light wave fist, but also to understand the essence of this technique more deeply so that, in the future, when using spiritual power to fuse with her own chakra, she can proceed more smoothly. In addition, during these 3 days of free time, besides learning the spirit light wave fist with the other two women, Liang Yue's home also successively welcomed several batches of guests. Most of them were teammates he had met at the China-Japan Exchange Conference. For example, the two Zhang brothers from Liang Yue Mountain, senior brother and sister Ying from the Maotian lineage, the two high-achieving disciples of Kwanzaa Taoism, the two Taoist priests Zhou and Lu from Wudang Mountain, the two personally passed-down disciples from Qingchang Mountain, and so on. And when leaving, the Zhang brothers from Liang Yue Mountain also left Liang Yue a jade pendant as a token, specially inviting him to participate in the next internal exchange conference of Taoism. The time is in 3 years, and the location is on their Liang Yue Mountain. To this, Liang Yue naturally had no reason to refuse, and happily agreed. The other people who came to visit, such as the Tang sect, the Northeast Shamanic Immortal family, and the Buddhist sect, were mostly from sects other than Taoism. And they came together to pay a polite visit. But besides that, there were also some other idlers. Some of them were casual cultivators from the previous selection competition, and some were dignitaries and social elites from the stands at the China-Japan Exchange Conference. Even some foreign envoys sent several invitations. Most of them were invitations to private dances and cocktail parties, as well as expressing the desire to have their children become his disciples, and so on. Liang Yue naturally had no interest in this, at least before his gunfighting school opened. He had no interest for the time being. In order to deal with these people, Liang Yue even specially hired a butler, as well as a dozen gatekeepers and male and female servants responsible for serving. However, even though he had expressed his attitude so clearly, and rejected all the people who came to visit, pay their respects, and give gifts, but it still couldn't stop the enthusiasm of the many dignitaries who sought immortality and asked questions, batch after batch, almost endlessly, tirelessly. Even the commercial district, which was only a wall away from his number 2 small courtyard, benefited from this, and the business had been booming in recent days. In this case, Liang Yue was still able to learn the principles and basic operation methods of the spirit light wave fist from Genkei. It has to be said that his learning ability is really strong. As Liang Yue's nominal senior sister, teacher Shizuka's identity is naturally also a Taoist, so at this moment, she, like Liang Yue, is wearing a simple blue-black Taoist robe with a white right lapel. Lining on her head was a simple bun, with a wooden hairpin inserted horizontally through the middle. In addition, as a symbol of the Oni warrior, the dark pattern armor hidden in the Taoist robe, and the one-eyed wrist guard on her wrist that was exactly the same as someone else's. This set of simple outfits made teacher Shizuka, who was originally a city beauty and school doctor, have a bit more otherworldly and classical charm. In addition, teacher Shizuka's exaggerated body proportions cough. Riding swiftly on the antique streets of Beiping, in about 20 minutes, Liang Yue's carriage arrived at Yuan Datao's mansion. Yes, although nominally, tonight's banquet was to thank these elites from the other world who worked for the country. The venue is at Datao's home. This kind of mixing public and private affairs, and not distinguishing between the two, has invisibly revealed his ambition. Needless to say, in addition to them, these otherworlders, those who are invited to participate in Yuan Datao's family banquet tonight, are probably all talents who can gain Yuan Datao's trust. Liang Yue had nothing to say about this. Looking at it, time has come to the early winter season. According to the historical development process, probably in December, Yuan Datao should restore the imperial system and ascend the throne himself immediately afterwards. His actions aroused strong opposition from all walks of life throughout the country. Among them, there were people from various democratic parties in the south, as well as powerful military and political figures from Datao's own command. In short, probably in the middle of next year, it will be the moment of his life's curtain call. It is said that he died from the torment of uremia before the gate of Yuan's mansion. After Liang Yue got out of the car, Yuan Datao, who was originally in the gatehouse, immediately greeted him with a smile and cupped his hands. After exchanging a few polite greetings, he personally led Liang Yue and teacher Shizuka into the hall. After taking their seats, before they had time to talk much, someone came to report from outside the door that the senior brother and sister from the Maotian sect had also arrived. Yuan Datao had no choice but to apologize to him, then lifted the hem of his robe again and walked quickly towards the gate of the mansion. Liang Yue and Shizuka also got up and came to the front of the hall. Liang Yue, what do you think of Yuan? At this time, Shizuka suddenly asked a rare question, apparently curious about Yuan Datao. What do you think? Liang Yue asked back with a slight curl of his lips when he heard the words. I think he seems very amiable and charming. He's an interesting old man. Shizuka thought for a while and replied, at this time, in terms of personal charm and dealing with people, there is naturally nothing to fault. After all, in this troubled world, those who can climb to his position are all shrewd people, but Yuan Datao is more like a politician than a soldier. He is good at balancing power and playing tricks, but lacks the domineering spirit honed from commanding troops and killing, so I personally think that it is okay for him to maintain and manage the balance of power in the country, but as a founding monarch, he is far behind. After speaking, looking at senior brother and sister Ying from Maotian sect who were walking under Yuan Datao's lead not far away, Liang Yue immediately clasped his fists and stood in front of the hall with a smile to greet them. Chapter 538 Make a Wish for an Official Post. Today, to be able to invite all of you elites from the world of the extraordinary, I, Yuan, am truly honored. In times of crisis, the true colors of heroes are revealed. My fellow colleagues, sparing no effort, responded to the government's call, traveling tirelessly from all corners of the country. It hasn't been many years since the Qing Emperor abdicated, and today the world is just beginning to settle, the nation with everything waiting to be rebuilt. Externally, we are surrounded by powerful enemies, and internally, there is constant conflict and endless infighting. The southern provinces, in particular, are plagued by warlords who form cliques and attack those who disagree, which truly pains me. How can we allow others to snore on our beds? Those dwarfs on the island nation, in a mere speck of land, dare to harbor wild ambitions, sharpening their swords and feeding their horses, coveting. Are we, as members of this generation, should strive for progress, overcome all difficulties, and work together for the country and its people. Now, the countries of Europe are plagued by endless wars and disputes. Although they all have reasons in name, they are ultimately fighting for their own interests. This is the misfortune of the people of Europe, but for China, it is a rare opportunity. I, Yuan, dare to hope that all of us with lofty ideals can. The opening of the banquet inevitably includes a passionate speech. This banquet, held at Yuan Datao's home, is naturally hosted by Datao himself, opening with a theme and speaking eloquently, enumerating the various advantages and disadvantages, and surveying the overall situation, touching upon the interests of various countries in the world and around China, from international affairs to domestic issues, from the factional warlords in various provinces to the great powers that secretly collude with them. Although it was only a brief 7 or 8-minute speech, the language was extremely refined, sincere, and heartfelt, conveying the international situation of the time, as well as the internal conflicts and entanglements within China. It aptly created a situation where there were strong enemies outside, domestic traitors within, the country was on the verge of collapse, and evil was rampant, clearly indicating that an era of great contention was about to arrive. Afterward, he suddenly changed his tone, raised his glass, and spoke frankly, expressing an impassioned stance that people of virtue in this chaotic world should strive to become stronger, be determined to make progress, eliminate demons and devils, and uphold justice. In short, the posture was grand enough, and the ambition was set high enough. It seems that Yuan Datao put a lot of effort into the opening of today's banquet. It was in this kind of atmosphere that Liang Yue and the others drank the first toast of the banquet, looking at Yuan Datao in the distance, with a flushed face, putting on a spirited, mountain-swallowing appearance. For a time, not only some military and political dignitaries present, but even those from the world of the extraordinary, were deeply moved and felt empathy in their hearts imperceptibly. They also developed some emotional common ground with him. Unfortunately, those present were not ordinary people. Not to mention those seasoned veterans who had been in the officialdom for many years, but even someone like Liang Yue, an outsider. Although most of them were focused on hard cultivation, immersed in their respective inherited worlds, and had not experienced much of the ups and downs of the world, their insight and perspective were exceptionally sharp. Yuan Datao's performance was indeed good, whether it was towards his subordinates or towards them, these extraordinary people. His attitude had always been approachable and amiable. Even the tone of his daily communication was like that of an elder in the family, making people unconsciously feel a sense of conviction. In addition, he was now the president of the Republic of China, and he also held the Beiyang armies under his command. It can be said that he held great power, dominating both the military and political circles. No matter how you look at it, this was a wise leader worthy of their wholehearted support. Unfortunately, the current Yuan Datao was still a bit too old. Although his current mental state seemed to be very good, his internal physical functions had already declined to a considerable extent, and he looked like he would not live long. and would soon pass away in a few years. How could this allow the group of extraordinary people present, and the inherited sex behind them, to raise their flags and clearly support you, even if you have thousands of wonderful ambitions and aspirations? What's the use of not being able to live therefore? Facing Yuan Datao's impassioned and determined posture at this time, others are hard to say, but at least in Liang Yu's heart at this moment, there was a bit of irony and sadness. Of course, the banquet in front of him was not a performance competition for one person as for Liang Yue and other extraordinary people. They were naturally here to get the benefits they deserved. Soon, after the banquet had been going on for more than an hour, everyone had eaten almost enough, but with the help of alcohol, the atmosphere in the room was still very lively at this moment. Just as Liang Yue was busy dealing with an unknown person at another table who was remotely toasting him, Yuan Datao walked over. Then, with a warm smile on his face, he opened his mouth and said, "This two-nation exchange meeting was thanks to the help of all of you national heroes. Over the years, our China has finally gained a great deal of face in front of the envoys of various countries in the 10 rounds of competition. Taoist priest Liang won 4 rounds single-handedly. And he won cleanly and neatly, truly showing the demeanor of a celestial being." As he said this, Yuan Datao paused and looked around. He saw that at this moment, the originally noisy voices in the banquet hall quickly became quiet because of his words, and everyone cast their gazes over the people around who were obviously waiting, wanting to see what kind of deal the two of them could reach. So, after Yuan Datao pondered for a moment, he continued, "Of course, I, Yuan, also know that in this secular world, it is difficult for anything to catch the eye of a high-ranking person like Taoist priest Liang, but with Taoist priest's achievements this time, if I don't express anything, it would be really inappropriate. So I, Yuan, on behalf of the entire national government, and also on behalf of myself, boldly ask Taoist priest, are there any requirements, or complicated matters, that we can help with?" Hearing Yuan Datao's words, Liang Yue immediately curled the corners of his mouth. He had, of course, long anticipated this promise from the President of the Republic of China, and he had been looking forward to it in his heart. At this time, he could, of course, pretend to be another worldly expert, lightly dismiss the other party's wish, and then stay away from the disturbances of the world, severing ties with a person in front of him. From then on, according to his wishes, he would continue to do his own thing, carefree and content. But given Liang Yu's current situation, there was no need for that at all. First of all, he did have something to ask of the other party, wanting to get something from Yuan Datao, the president. Furthermore, if Liang Yue directly rejected the other party's promise, indicating that he didn't care about any achievements, and that his actions this time were only to contribute to the country, without seeking any reward, although his personal image of being aloof and indifferent would be established as a result, what about the others? If the achievements of winning 4 rounds of competition could be given up, what would those elites from the inherited sex say? Even the extraordinary people who were originally happy and wanted to ask the government for some benefits would inevitably be affected by this if they opened their mouths to make requests. They couldn't bring themselves to do it. After all, there was already a gem in front. If they also pretended to be aloof and didn't want anything, then they would have come for nothing. Therefore, as the saying goes, the train runs fast, all thanks to the locomotive. Since President Yuan was the first to approach Liang Yue to ask about his requirements and wishes, then he was now the locomotive. He could only run forward, and once he turned back, it would be a bloody mess. In short, given Liang Yu's current situation, whether publicly or privately, he should accept the other party's promise, even if it was just asking for something dispensable. He couldn't directly refuse, otherwise, he would not only offend Yuan Datao's face, but also block the path of those behind him, and he would offend everyone present at once. Chapter 539 Legal Status. So, facing Yuan Datao's expectant inquiry, Liang Yue spoke directly. "What I want is an identity." "Oh? What kind of identity?" Hearing this, Datao tilted his head slightly, listening intently, his expression unusually serious, the kind that can legally carry a gun. Liang Yue looked calmly into the other's eyes as he replied, "Could it be that Taoist Liang wants to lead troops?" President Yuan Datao's eyes lit up upon hearing this. "Not at all. The identity I want is just the kind that can use various guns as weapons and be recognized by the government." Looking at Datao in front of him, Liang Yue curved the corners of his mouth. Needless to say, the purpose of him wanting this identity was naturally to prepare for gun kada guns, as standard equipment of modern national violent institutions, are rarely allowed to be owned by civilians, except in some merchant nations. Those people are either well connected, taking advantage of various loopholes with their privileges, or simply possessing them illegally, walking the gray and black lines of powerful figures. Neither of these was what Liang Yue wanted, but to practice and spread his gun kata. Possessing guns was a necessary prerequisite. Moreover, the various equipment they would be equipped with at that time would have to be continuously advanced and developed in a personalized direction, which would inevitably attract the attention of many people. However, Liang Yue didn't want to turn his future sect organization into a gathering place like abandoned stronghold. Fortunately, coinciding with the Sino-Japanese Exchange Conference, he had made significant contributions in this competition of supernatural beings. Taking this opportunity, he could just solve this problem in one fell swoop. With Taoist's current abilities, you have already transcended the ordinary and reached the pinnacle. Why would you still care about these external things? Hearing Liang Yue's words, Yuan Datao was immediately surprised and asked with a look of astonishment. The world today can be described as undergoing sudden changes. The international world is ushering in unprecedented changes in its structure. Many things are changing, and guns are becoming the standard weapons for countries to wage war and protect their countries. Therefore, I believe that our world of superhumans will not be spared either, and will eventually be drawn into this situation. Being able to master and become proficient in this weapon sooner will allow us to achieve a balance against the enemy sooner. He paused, and then continued. Therefore, my wish is to transform a sect seeking truth and inquiring about the Dao is naturally what we people strive for in our lives, but using guns to defend against enemies can also become a skill and means of the Zuanmen people. Taoist's actions are truly far-sighted and enterprising. I am inferior. After listening to his words, Yuan Datao took a deep breath, digested it for a while, and couldn't help but nod in admiration, expressing his approval. After flattering him a few words, he suddenly changed the subject and continued to ask, but may I ask, Taoist, if your sect wants to establish itself with firearms, how many places will you need? This question is actually quite crucial. After all, guns are inherently sensitive. If the number of people is small, it can be excused as sect practice, but once the number is large, it is actually a personalized army. It might just be the birth history of another warlord. Liang Yue naturally knew the sensitivity of this matter, so he didn't ask for much, and said directly, a sect can have at most 180 people. In that case, I can give Taoist 500 or no, 600 places, but half of them must be handled by my Republic of China government. If among those people, there are some who are insincere and harbor dissent, then Taoist can dispose of them at that time, whether it is expulsion or any other handling method. You don't have to go through my Republic of China government. Okay, then let's make it a deal. After speaking, Yuan Datao raised a palm and bumped it against Liang Yue's, making a pledge with a high five. This matter was thus settled. Yuan Datao was obviously very satisfied with this result. He was quite ecstatic. With a look of excitement and joy on the surface, he had at least successfully established contact with Liang Yue because of this promise and decision, and also had the opportunity to infiltrate some of his own people into the world of superhumans. This is definitely a big deal. How much Zuanmen magic can be learned is secondary. At least this channel has been established because of this. This is definitely of paramount importance to his upcoming great cause. Many military and political circles, and even more social elites and local dignitaries, will therefore be more inclined to approach him because he now holds a full 300 precious places that can allow ordinary people to enter the world of superhumans. Of course, to achieve all this, it will definitely take time. After all, the inheritance of a sect cannot be achieved overnight. Just building a mountain gate from scratch will take at least several months, or even more than a year, and what he lacks most now is actually time. At this time, Yuan Datao certainly couldn't imagine that the middle of next year would be his deadline. Everything he is doing now, seemingly becoming more and more perfect, and constantly advancing in a good direction, is ultimately just making wedding clothes for others. On the other hand, Liang Yue naturally knew what it meant to hand over half of the places to the Republic of China government, but he didn't care about these because in the final analysis, everything Liang Yue did was just to do his part for the upcoming wars and disputes on the land of China. Oh, by the way, may I ask, Taoist, where is your sect's mountain gate located? Do you need to expand it appropriately? After laughing heartily, Yuan Datao quickly calmed down, and then began to focus on the implementation of the cooperation between the two parties. My Liuan sect was originally just a small sect located deep in the remaining veins of the Kindling Mountains. It is located in a remote area, which is not conducive to entry and exit. After my master ascended to immortality, only our senior brothers and sisters are left in the sect this time out of the mountain. What we seek is to save the world and survive, to practice in the mundane world. Now that the matter in Beijing is over, in a few days, we plan to go to the Central Plains and find a mountain at random to establish a sect. In the past few days, After thinking again and again, Liang Yue finally decided to open the sect in the central plains of China first. The people there are indeed very bitter and need rescue and help. Secondly, placing their mountain gate in the central plains, whether going north, west, or even northeast. In this era, there are foreign tribes making trouble, and external forces are taking the opportunity to infiltrate before the national war officially breaks out. It can just serve as a place for the disciples to practice. In fact, if we really want to talk about quietly and steadily opening a mountain gate and establishing a sect, the land of abundance in the southwest is his best choice. However, whether it is the practice of gun kata or the power of the Oni Musao, they are both walking the path of practical combat, using killing to stop killing, and they cannot complete the upgrade and transition peacefully. Therefore, that area on the edge of the center of various troubles and entanglements, the Central Plains, is more suitable for the development of Liang Yue and the others. Does Taoist favor the Shaanxi area? Good. Then let Yuan Mu handle this matter. The national government will definitely help Taoist build a mountain gate worthy of Taoist as soon as possible, then I will accept it without ceremony. Ha ha ha. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 540 Offensive and Defensive Alliance. After dealing with Liang Yue's affairs, the following time was naturally for rewarding the other gifted individuals. However, generally speaking, Yuan Datao's attitude towards the sects like Dragon Tiger Mountain, Wudang Mountain, Maotian, Quanzhen Taoism, and Shaolin Temple was unlikely to reach the same level as it was with Liang Yue. After all, they were an already well-established, time-honored top sects, having stood tall for hundreds or thousands of years in this vast world of Chinese gifted individuals. There was no need for him, a president whose unifying power and influence were even disputed, to change anything. Common appeasement strategies like bestowing titles, tax exemptions, and offering gold and silver were merely icing on the cake for them. It was not enough for those transcendent masters dwelling in the mountains to willingly serve him. Yuan. This assistance and reward could, at best, be considered a tentative interaction between the two sides. At this moment, everyone knew that Yuan Shikai had ambitions to become emperor, but no one could say how far he could go. The various forces in the world of gifted individuals were also watching during the Sino-Japanese Exchange Conference. The major sects had dispatched their elites, not only adhering to the principle of shared honor and shared loss, and coming to serve the country, they might also have sent knowledgeable disciples to calculate and evaluate Yuan Datao's fate at close range. Therefore, after this exchange conference, or rather, after today's banquet, the major sects' attitudes towards this president should become clearer. After all, he was just a little old man whose days were numbered, so why should you expect so much? Therefore, imperceptibly, whether it was the Zhang brothers of Dragon Tiger Mountain, the Maotian's uncle Ying and his sister, or the Buddhist Sangba Yi monk, they all intentionally or unintentionally kept a distance from him during this banquet. They ate what they should eat, drank what they should drink, took what they should take, and returned the courtesy without missing a beat. They were courteous and impeccable. However, there seemed to be a layer of glass between them from beginning to end, visible but impossible to get close to. Yuan Datao's side naturally received this clear signal. Therefore, at this moment, he would certainly not be foolish enough to expend extra resources to win over these elites of the major sects. He simply gave some routine rewards and policy preferences before ignoring them. Therefore, if one were to really talk about the gains from tonight's banquet, these elite figures in the world of gifted individuals might not be as good as those loose cultivators who had chosen to completely rely on the government in the previous selection competition. Compared to Liang Yue, a speculator who was about to directly establish a sect by leveraging the government's channels and power, there was even less comparison. Soon, another half-month passed in the blink of an eye. During this period, Huanhe finally completed her mission, explaining all the precautions and specific training methods of the luminous Wei Fist to Hinata, and cooperated with Liang Yue to study the basic attributes of her own spiritual power. For a while then, she left China and boarded the official passenger ship back to Japan as a tool person. She was quite qualified. Maotian, Dragon Tiger Mountain, Wudang Mountain, Quanzhen Taoism, Qingchen, and even Lingbao sect and other sect inheritances, they might not take Yuan Datao, the president, and the Republican government behind him seriously, but they would never choose to remain indifferent to the instructions personally passed down by their ancestors with divine thoughts. That was an unforgivable crime for them, the later disciples. Therefore, in this farewell gathering, Liang Yue and this group of people reached a consensus on the goal. All parties decided to make preliminary verbal agreements and establish a basic framework for an alliance of offense and defense after they returned to their respective sects, reported this matter to their elders, and communicated the news to the various Taoist sects. They would discuss the details in detail after that. They bid farewell to each other and left in a hurry. In comparison, the old, middle-aged, and young monks from Buddhism stayed behind and communicated with Liang Yue, a master who was about to establish a sect in the Central Plains. For a while longer. The reason was nothing more than to get closer to him, their neighbor, in advance and enhance their understanding of each other. The two sides formed a good relationship. That's all. If you really want to talk about preparing to stand guard together and jointly resist the enemy, like these inheritances of their Taoist lineage, judging from the experience in the past, these bald donkeys are definitely not that active faced with foreign invaders. The attitude they show in most cases is ambiguous, helping whoever wins, and once it really comes to war, they are also accustomed to closing the mountains and nurturing forests. However, this is also understandable. After all, most of the Buddhas they usually worship and enshrine are not native gods of China, and they do not have any national sentiments. Even if there are some, they mostly depend on the individual integrity and cultural influence of the local temples. It is not very hopeful to expect their Buddhas to issue instructions and join the Taoist sects to expel the Tartars. Therefore, after slightly dealing with this future neighbor, Liang Yue ignored these three people. The three Shaolin monks were still a bit discerning. The next day, they immediately packed their bags and bid farewell, since he had already boasted in front of many guests that he would help Liang Yue build a mountain gate residence worthy of him. Yuan Datao naturally had to take practical action for this reason. In the past half-month, the two sides had interacted and communicated quite closely. Although, in his contact with Liang Yue, this president mostly focused on various forms of wooing and hospitality, often dragging him to chat about trivial matters. But as a promise that had already been made, some substantive progress was also clearly visible. At the very least, the location of the mountain gate had been decided under the joint discussion of Liang Yue and Yuan Datao. The location finally selected by the two was Mount Taipei. As the highest peak of the Qinling Mountains, it is located west of Xi'an, adjacent to Mount Zhongnan. Although it is slightly inferior to Mount Zhongnan, the #1 blessed land in the world, in terms of fame, it is also listed as the 11th cave heaven and blessed land of Taoism. It is also rich in resources and exceptionally fertile. Many literati and poets have visited and left ink inscriptions since ancient times. Most importantly, compared to the strong label of Mount Zhongnan, which is known as the ancestral court of Quanzhen, the forces in this area of Mount Taipei are relatively less powerful. Even if Liang Yue takes the official government order to settle in, it should not encounter too much resistance. Of course, even if there are some unknown powerful figures who are ready to jump out and cause trouble with him, at worst, the two sides will just fight it out in this world. After all, you still have to rely on strength to speak. Chapter 541. Many hands make light work. Despite Yuan Datao's best efforts to retain him, even to the point of pleading in his words, Liang Yue, along with the two women by his side, left beeping ahead of schedule after November began, escaping this land of turmoil. Of course, as a return for Yuan Datao's repeated solicitations and generous gifts, Liang Yue made a special trip to the Yuan residence before leaving behind a bottle of 100-fruit wine. He stated directly that a small cup each evening could alleviate the ailments plaguing Yuan Datao's body for a few years. As a wine produced in the Stardew Valley wine barrel, this 100-fruit wine, although unable to compare with ancient fruit wine due to the brewing materials, still possessed some nourishing and detoxifying effects. Liang Yue could have directly left a bottle of ancient fruit wine to cure Yuan Datao's ailments. Considering the price Yuan Datao had paid to win him over during this period, it would have been more than enough to recoup the costs. Unfortunately, for the Republic of China of today, an emperor and dictator were no longer needed, especially since that position itself was only secured by Yuan Shikai through some means and political maneuvering. Severely lacking in virtue and persuasiveness, Liang Yue strongly suspected that Yuan Datao's illness itself might not have been so serious, at least not life-threatening. It was only under his forced ascension to the throne that he couldn't withstand the impact of the nation's fortune, leading to his collapse the following year. In short, although Liang Yue had the means to help him preserve his life and recuperate his body, he did not do so in the current situation and international environment. China needed a group of people with more courage, wisdom, and skill to steer the ship, leading the entire nation to overcome obstacles and forge ahead. What? Let Liang Yue himself do it. Should a ruler hold a tripod, conquering the world in 10 years, governing it in 10 years, and ushering in peace in 10 years. Is that enough? He simply didn't have that thought as the 12th lunar month approached. The Central Plains were entering a season of freezing cold. A sudden snowfall covered the entire land with a layer of silver. People invariably put on thick clothes, whether old or new winter clothes, cotton, linen, or fur. From what Liang Yue personally witnessed, at least in this era, the people of Xi'an were living reasonably well as an important coal-producing area in China. The abundant coal supply made the people of the Central Plains slightly happier than those in other northern regions in this ancient city. Almost every household had smoke rising from its chimney. A faint, subtle, acidic smell also permeated the air. After all, the current season could still be considered a peaceful time, far from the chaotic situation of warlord separatism and constant warfare in the decades to come. High-yield crops such as potatoes, corn, and sweet potatoes had already become popular among the people. Some snack categories and street stalls from later generations had already begun to take shape in this era. Various pastries, candied haws, sugar cakes, pasta, and even meat products such as chicken, duck, pork, beef, mutton, and donkey, as well as raw giamo, were everywhere. Walking among them, Liang Yue and his party also felt a sense of novelty that made them almost dizzy. It smells so good. It smells like it's very delicious. The lives of the people here look pretty good. It would be great if it could continue to develop like this. Hey, there's a restaurant selling braised beef over there. Our identity now is that of Taoists. We can't eat beef. Oh, look over there. There's also a mutton restaurant. It looks pretty good too. Okay, let's eat there at noon then. About 30 minutes later, Liang Yue and the three had eaten their fill and slowly walked out of the mutton restaurant. At this time, teacher Jingxiang was stroking her belly with a satisfied expression, marveling at the mellow and delicious taste of the mutton, and said that she would come here again next time. After that, she directly ran to a stall on the street and packed 3 portions of 8 treasure gourd duck before finally feeling content. Hinata, who was on the side, seemed a little more alert at this time. After looking around for a while, she said to Liang Yue, "Chun-Qiu, it seems like we're being watched." "It's okay, just some idlers. We're new here, and we're about to establish a sect on Mount Taipei, so some people will naturally be curious about us." Liang Yue naturally noticed the situation Hinata mentioned from the beginning, but he didn't take it to heart. This confident and calm attitude naturally stemmed from his strength. In addition, with the end of the previous Sino-Japanese exchange conference, a whole month had been enough for some busybodies to spread the news of that day to various parts of China. Although the competition that day had already ended, the impact it brought had not weakened in the slightest. Instead, as time went on, it began to intensify in various regions. Although only 1,000 or so people were present to watch the battle that day, and most of them were not gossipy people who couldn't control their tongues, but even the most powerful and local gentry could resist acquaintances asking them about the situation that day. There were always some people who were qualified to know about the existence of this ability exchange conference, but didn't have the ability to enter the venue to watch the battle, who couldn't resist their curiosity and came to inquire about information. As a result, news about the competition spread like wildfire. 1,000 passed it on to 10,000, 10,000 passed it on to 1,000,000 slowly. As time went on, the news that China had won all 10 battles in that exchange meeting was spread to various parts of China by various well-intentioned people, intentionally or unintentionally, and Liang Yue, such an unknown existence who could win 4 consecutive victories in the competition, was naturally particularly concerned. In addition, the recent news that the Republic of China government was going to help this Taoist priest build a mountain gate on Mount Taipei had also spread. Some ignorant people had previously thought this was just a rumor, but as Mount Taipei began to break ground and a large number of workers and craftsmen were conscripted nowadays, even in this cold winter season just after the snow, there was no sign of stopping work. Instead, batches of workers from all over the country joined one after another. As a result, this news has now been confirmed. Under such circumstances, it was naturally understandable that both the other world and ordinary folk were curious about him as for why it was necessary to start construction in this cold winter month. In fact, it wasn't that Yuan Datao and the Republic of China government didn't want to stop, but that they simply couldn't stop. Think about it, at the banquet that day, after Yuan Datao took 300 places from Liang Yue, in order to achieve his great cause, he would naturally use the places as bargaining chips to win over and recruit people from all sides. It is said that when Liang Yue left Beeping City, most of the 300 places had already been distributed. You think the people who can be won over by Yuan Datao, in addition to the group of confidants who are already by his side, are naturally powerful figures who hold power and have considerable influence after paying the price and making promises, and getting a few places. What these people think about is naturally to let themselves, or their children, nephews, and confidants, realize it as soon as possible. In short, it is necessary to quickly establish a relationship with the other world and join the Mountain Gate as soon as possible. After all, things will change if you are late. What if the Mountain Gate of your sect has not been built yet? Add money. Speed up. Send more people. What if there is not enough money? Donate. What if there are not enough workers and craftsmen? Find with more money and higher prices. Whoever gets the place, whose descendants want to join the other world sect, will be responsible for finding it. If you really can't find it, and you don't have any connections in this area for a while, quickly write letters, submit notes, and send telegrams to the local competent departments in Xi'an. In this way, whether it is the political or military circles, they are now being united into one rope under the combined action of various external and internal factors rarely united together, and thus supervising the construction of the Mountain Gate project. At this time, even the Nanjing side, which has not been very compatible with the Beiping government, sent people to donate a considerable amount of money, and stationed a supervisory team responsible for supervising the construction and construction efficiency of the Mountain Gate, and ensuring the safety of the workers and craftsmen in the mountain, as well as the implementation of various salary and benefits. In short, the construction of Liang Yue's sect has now been substantively raised to the level of a national event. The complex forces of all parties are jointly promoting and jointly handling it, and it can't be stopped even if you want to. Even Yuan Datao can't do it. Liang Yue's resolute departure from Beiping before, without regard to the solicitation and request of this president, was actually a bit defensive. But even if that's the case, what can you do? The 300 places intercepted by the Republic of China government are not only Datao's bargaining chips, but now they have also become Liang Yue's bargaining chips. As long as the current Yuan Shikai has any intention of hindering this matter, Liang Yue doesn't need to do anything at all, and some people will talk to him. Chapter 542 Wandering Around. Since the construction of the Mountain Gate was still in full swing, after arriving in Xi'an City, Liang Yue spent most of his time in the city, except for occasionally going up the mountain every 3 or 2 days to observe the progress and offer some guiding opinions for accommodation. He simply found an empty space outside the city and built a few stone houses himself to live in temporarily every day. Besides the routine morning practice, he wandered around the city and its surroundings. However, he wasn't just wandering aimlessly. While familiarizing himself with the local terrain and observing the people and things in the area, Liang Yue would occasionally communicate with some of the local big shots among them. He also frequently contacted the Quanzhong Taoists, whose ancestral home was nearby. After all, no matter how much one cultivates purity and transcends the mundane, people are still people and cannot completely escape the habit of social living. In addition, the news of Liang Yue's arrival had already spread far and wide, and even some independent cultivators from the world of supernaturals, disciples of various sects traveling abroad, were also curious about him and often appeared in nearby towns. Liang Yue's newly built simple stone houses outside the city had recently become a sightseeing and check-in spot for some people, both supernatural beings and ordinary people. Even recently, some minor gang leaders among ordinary people had been emboldened to come and curry favor with him, aiming to promote several clever disciples who had just joined their gangs. It seems that these people have set their sights on the remaining spots in his hands, and those so-called novice disciples may not really be from ordinary families, although their appearance is somewhat unique. However, Liang Yue didn't want to pay attention to how much entanglement and twists there were in it, but the appearance of these gang leaders did remind him that his own Mountain Gate is about to be built, and the progress of the construction is so gratifying that it is completely visible to the naked eye, almost changing every day. In this situation, should he also start considering the issue of recruiting disciples, act on impulse? So, in the next few days, Liang Yue took Jingxiang and Hinata, the two girls, and began to wander around Xi'an City, frequently taking action and cracking down hard. Later, he simply cooperated with a local garrison and police to wipe out several human trafficking dens in the area in one fell swoop with the assistance of the Tensigan and the panoramic sand table. Whether it was a large-scale gang affiliated with some organizations or a small team of 2 or 3 people operating independently, none of them could escape Liang Yue's sanctions. Just from these people's hands, the number of boys and girls aged 2 or 3, 3 or 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 who were rescued had exceeded 500. Among them, there were also 20 or 30 babies who had just been born a few months ago and were still in swaddling clothes. According to the Great Ming Law, those who abduct young children shall be executed, and those who practice Keisheng's Ehe shall be executed by dismemberment. The later Qing dynasty seemed to have also adopted part of the Ming dynasty's laws. and the current Republic of China also deeply hates such acts in this era of unstable situation, underdeveloped information dissemination, and ambiguous aspects in all aspects. Human life is actually very worthless. Therefore, those gangs and individuals who participated in these activities, regardless of gender, ultimately could not escape death. Perhaps, before Liang Yue came, some local officials and soldiers had already been well aware of these bad things in their city, pretending to be ignorant while knowing the truth only because there were some conflicts of interest. They turned a blind eye to them and adopted a policy of appeasement. But now it's different. Liang Yue has come along with him. There was also excessive attention from all over the country. From various administrative centers, this situation is like hundreds of thousands of bright spotlights focusing simultaneously on the shady areas that even the sun could hardly shine on in the past. As a result, many people in the area were also sitting on pins and needles, trembling with fear now that Liang Yue, this guy, has unveiled that layer of window paper. They naturally have to quickly wipe their asses, wipe all traces clean, so as not to be held accountable in the future and involve themselves. In short, Liang Yue is here, and the sky is clear. These words were not said by Liang Yue himself, but were the views debated by the local people in the streets and alleys after the incident. Apart from not knowing the specific name of this person involved, the meaning is generally the same. However, Liang Yue did not feel complacent about this, because he is still busy dealing with these children. He rescued a full 500 or 600 abducted children, most of whom are local, are now being properly handled with the cooperation of city officials and soldiers. Those who are a little older and recognize people and places are naturally escorted home. Those who are younger and don't remember things are posted all over the city with notices, waiting for their parents to come and claim them in person. This method and progress will naturally be slower in the Republic of China, where information channels are not developed, but fortunately, the progress is still smooth. In order to encourage local officials and soldiers to really take this matter seriously, Liang Yue directly took out 10 places to ensure that those people would do their best for this. Among them, 5 places were allocated to senior officials and officers, and 5 to middle and lower level clerks and ordinary soldiers. Although those superiors had some objections to the distribution of these places, the actual effect was quite good, and the enthusiasm of everyone from top to bottom was mobilized. In addition, besides these children who were abducted locally and were about to be sold all over the country, the rest were mostly transported here from other places and were about to be sold. There are quite a few, as many as 100, anyway, since this batch of traffickers, inside and outside the city, was uprooted by him. The local forces, except for the government and the military, basically remained as quiet as chickens. They stayed aside and watched dutifully, and no one dared to jump out and claim them. After patiently questioning these children, Liang Yue found that most of them knew nothing about their past. Only a few people could barely remember that they were taken away when they were very young, and then gathered with other children, learning a few words and verses, and being taught some basics such as playing musical instruments. But that was all later. Even Liang Yue was unable to figure out where they came from. With his Tensigan ability, there was no way. These children were too young when they were abducted, and some were taken away from their parents as soon as they were born. At that time, their thoughts were chaotic, and their brains had not yet fully developed. Some vague fragments of memory were not enough to allow people to judge their specific origins. There was no other way. In the end, Liang Yue had to come forward himself. After confirming that no one would really come to claim them, he directly assigned these children to his own mountain gate. Anyway, the 600 places that Liang Yue had agreed with Yuan Dekao were only the number of disciples who were allowed to carry guns for combat and self-defense, with a slight modification. Those disciples who normally practice ancient methods, or even just participate in gunfighting skills training, but do not use guns as their main combat means, are certainly not included. I think my dignified Taoist sect in the world of supernaturals, normally recruiting cultivation disciples from the secular world, is justified, and it's not up to your Republic of China government to interfere, right? Chapter 543 Mountain Academy. Now that they had recruited people, Liang Yue and the others began to consider the issue of teaching. After all, they were just children, some only 2 or 3 years old, and the oldest were no more than 8 or 9 years old, so it was naturally unsuitable to start them off with intense external martial arts. Even some internal cultivation methods could only be used in moderation, picking some basic methods that strengthened the foundation and nourished the source, with gentle attributes, for cultivation. Although the DC world in front of them had a very high upper limit, the energy level of the current Earth was just so-so, basically at the same level as Marvel. It was far behind those well-known immortal and fantasy worlds in the myriad realms. He created an artificial lake with an infinite water source, adapting to local conditions, connecting mountains, water, fields, and canals, and surrounded the land with a circle of walls that were 3 meters wide and 5 or 6 meters high. After finishing, he directly called out Siko, Alwyn, Nana, and others from the stronghold world who were busy with dungeons, and asked them to check for omissions in his construction project, which covered 50 or 60 acres in short. After busying himself for half a day, Liang Yue finally built his mountain academy, teaching buildings, libraries, dormitories, faculty buildings, canteens, gymnasiums, large playgrounds, tree-lined avenues, fountains, various stairs, corridors, and pavilions built according to the terrain, and so on, were all available. Even considering the teaching of future life skills, Liang Yue built a chicken, duck, goose, and pig farm on a gentle, wooded slope in a corner of the school. After another night of detailed adjustments, fine decoration, and circuit laying, someone finally took Shizuka, Saya Takagi, Zio Zhao, Nana, and a few others back to Xi'an City. They began recruiting teaching staff and purchasing various books, textbooks, and even daily consumables. As for the 100 or so young boys and girls, after Liang Yue personally greeted them, a team of soldiers drove a convoy, led by teacher Shizuka, all the way to the academy. In this way, after busying themselves for another 3 or 4 days, the school's various supporting facilities and teaching staff were finally ready. In fact, it wasn't difficult to find some teachers for teaching and educating people, and Liang Yue had the support of the local military and political circles to help him. Moreover, he wasn't looking for university teachers, or even high school teachers. What really troubled Liang Yue was the teaching books on the market. Now that the Qing dynasty had just disbanded a few years ago, the entire land of China was still full of its lingering poison, and all kinds of classics and collections were filled with a taste of old and decayed things. Either they were tampered with 8-legged essays, or they were classics and literary collections that had long been distorted from their original meaning. As someone who could barely be considered knowledgeable in ancient and modern history, how could Liang Yue look up to those things? So, after only purchasing a batch of the most basic 3-character classic, 1,000-character classic, etc. on the market, he directly shifted his gaze to the collections he had stored in the library tower of the stronghold world, like the myriad longevity Taoist canon of the Song dynasty, the Yongle encyclopedia of the Ming dynasty, various original history books, poetry collections, classics, works of famous people, etc., were all available. After receiving Liang Yue's order, Zio Wu's clone in the stronghold world also directly opened up the horsepower and copied and engraved this batch of classical books. In addition, Liang Yue and the women also specially selected, summarized, and compiled some knowledge from modern textbooks. There was no need to involve some particularly professional knowledge systems. For example, various subjects such as physics, chemistry, and biology were at most only related to the level of junior high school graduation. In later generations, various philosophical subjects that could help people better establish their worldview, such as Lao Ma's historical materialism, were the focus of their discussion. Of course, when this type of philosophical subject was finally presented on paper, it had also undergone a proper layer of translation and reference comparison. For example, when printing the view that matter determines consciousness as a comparison, Liang Yue also very considerately printed on the other side of the book the simple Chinese classical values, such as when the granary is full, one knows etiquette, and when one has enough food and clothing, one knows honor and disgrace. Such a comparison and corroboration is more convincing, and this part of the content was what really needed to take time and needed Liang Yue and others to focus on. Fortunately, they also had the intelligent brain Zio Wu assisting them, who could check the discussions of everyone point to point and point to surface at any time, ensuring the correctness and professionalism of the labor results of this group of dilettantes. As night fell, after seeing off the last batch of local officials and gentry who came to visit during the day and also had a free dinner in the cafeteria, and taking care of a group of teachers and children to enter the dormitory, Liang Yue and the women around him gathered together again at this moment, surrounded by a new lava stove, and began another discussion meeting. As for the content of the meeting, it was naturally about the selection of exercises in the inheritance of their sect. In fact, the reading, writing, classics, and collections were only for opening the wisdom of the disciples in the sect, increasing their knowledge, and laying the foundation for cultivation. Any school or private school can actually do this kind of thing as a different person sect. The most important thing is, of course, the inheritance and cultivation methods that can promote evolution. Of course, some exercises involve the secret techniques of other sects, such as the highest secret technique of Dragon Tiger Mountain, 9 Heavens Imperial Thunder True Scripture, which Liang Yue obtained from the world of Yishin and Dragon Saber. which he had always wanted to practice but could not, although it is not necessarily the same as the Dragon Tiger Mountains Town sect's unique skill in the world in front of him. It cannot be easily passed on to the disciples of the sect. At least, you have to change the name first. However, the world of Yishin and Dragon Saber is ultimately just a martial arts plane, while the current Chinese alien world of DC can be directly linked to alien gods, belonging to a cosmic plane that has broken through the shackles of the planet. The cultivation paths produced between the two, even if there is some overlap, it should be difficult to associate them together. Chapter 544 Fireside Chat. So, our current situation is that we have mostly third-rate skills like Grasshopper Leap, Water Treading, Mandarin Duck Kick, and 5 Tiger Broken Door Saber. As for second-rate skills, there are quite a few like 5 Elements Fist, Stone Crushing Kick, Iron Body, including the foundational Quanzian Swordplay and such techniques like 13 Taibao Horizontal Training, Huashin's Chao Yuan One Key Sword, Ziyi Swordplay, and Jade Shattering Palm. Probably don't rank as first-rate yet, maybe top-tier second-rate. If we calculate it that way, then the standard for first-rate should be Huashin's Zixa Divine Skill, Shaolin's Golden Bell Cover, Yi Jinjing, and Jiu Chuji's Lineage's Pure Yang Mysterious Skill. There's also the superior swordplay from the Quanzian School, 1 sword transforms into 3 purities, and even 9 Yang Divine Skill, 9 Yin Manual, etc. Hun Yuan Gong should also be ranked as a first-rate skill, but relatively speaking, it should be a bit lower than, shouldn't the Xianshan skill left by the Pure Yang ancestor, the 9 Heavens Thunderclap True Scripture passed down through generations in Longhu Mountain, and the Taijuan Sutra inherited from the Tang Dynasty be considered top-level martial arts. I think we should add a unique level in between, like Dugu 9 Swords, Great Shift of Kayankin, and Liang Yue's current Swift Meteor, etc. They are probably slightly lower than the achievements that top-level martial arts can achieve, but it's not necessarily impossible for them to catch up to the top level. Isn't that a bit backwards? The unique skills should be ranked above the top level, then Xianshan, Taijuan, 9 Heavens Thunderclap True Scripture, etc., should be listed as unique skills, and the others as top level A? Is that so? In addition to these martial arts manuals from different worlds, we also have special inheritances like Dazhu Fist. In terms of power and effect, it's not at the top level, or even below the unique level, but because the principle is relatively special, it can be practiced concurrently in most cases. That's right, the effect after practicing Dazhu Fist is no worse than the spiritual light ripple fist taught by Huanhe before, and relatively speaking, the field involved in Dazhu Fist is even more comprehensive. It's just that the former mainly uses physical skills, while the latter excels in spiritual power. Then that nameless sword manual that Liang Yue bought from the mall before, which can cultivate sword energy, should also be considered a unique skill, right? Yes. There's absolutely no problem in listing it as a unique skill. What about Bagua Palm? It feels like it's okay too. Bagua Palm can be regarded as a weakened version of Dazhu Fist. It can almost be ranked among the second-rate skills, but the principle is also unique and can be practiced concurrently. From this point of view, it can barely be listed within the first-rate. Well, then there's no need to look at third-rate skills for the time being. In the future, they can be placed in the Mountain Gates library as extracurricular books for the disciples to increase their knowledge. Second-rate skills, such as Quanzian Swordplay, can be used to lay the foundation, and so can Bagua Palm. In addition, the Kunlun School's 2 instruments Saber, the Kongtong School's Lotus Double, and Shaolin's various staff techniques, stick techniques, and saber techniques can also be included in the basic inheritance of the sect. So, according to Liang Yue's meaning, in this place, we need to raise the requirements for the sect skills by 1 level. Yes, regarding this point, just look at the sect inheritance behind Huanhe. Judging from the power that spiritual light ripple fist can exert in this place, at least having top-level and unique level skills is enough to be called a major sect inheritance in the world of special individuals. First-rate skills may not be considered rare, however, they should also be able to be used as a means of daily combat. Is that so? Then the research on various levels of ninjutsu, and the problem of converting spells, should also be put on the agenda as soon as possible. That's right, other Taoist inheritances can use various natural powers by simply drawing talismans and performing Kimandunjia. Our family can't fall behind either the Golden Light Charm, Wind Control Art, Object Control Technique, Fireball Technique, Palm Thunder, etc., recorded in the Chongchun Gong are very suitable for this world. So, should we make this Chongchun Gong the inheritance skill of the sect leader? It seems not possible. Although the level of this immortal cultivation skill is sufficient, it is required to have a wood-attributed spiritual root, at least with talent in this area. The condition is a bit too restrictive. We also have the Atoryu combat skills passed down by Nesta before, and the matching soul cultivation skills. The power and level of this skill are sufficient, and it must not be easily spread out. The same goes for the two secret techniques, Mulo Sutra and Spirit Flame Art. So, do we need to create our own skills, like the purple golden light shield created by Chunkyu before, and the Spirit Arrow technique? Almost we can actually combine more skills from the, such as Lightning Strike, Ice Roar, Hell Lightning, Confining Spell, Summoning Divine Beast, etc. Yes. And those skills in the Diablo 2 system. Did it the reward we got from the system before completely transform the skill tree into reality? That's right, I forgot if you didn't tell me. This is possible for the spells of the magician system. Maybe we can also learn from it, but we can't take them all out. Therefore, we must manage the disciples in a stratified and graded manner. You mean, like those in novels, handyman disciples, outer disciples, inner disciples, and personal disciples? Yes, cultivation aptitude is one aspect, and character should also be included in the scope of assessment, but in this way, it feels so troublesome. Therefore, regarding this point, we should start recording and screening from the daily life of the academy and cultivation and guidance. Let the two coexist. Anyway, they will eventually lead to the same goal. I increasingly feel that there is not such a big difference between immortals and martial arts in the process of cultivation. The two will occasionally intersect, and we don't need to strictly limit the path of our disciples. If we really want to choose, let them choose for themselves. Immortal and martial arts are equally important. That's good. What about gunfighting skills? Both sides have to learn and practice this. It's such an efficient way of combat, and it doesn't require any energy consumption. There's no reason to stand on one side. What about the quota limit set for us by Yuan Shike? How many years does he have to live? Besides, even if he is always there, he won't turn against us for a few over-limited quotas. Then it's settled. Yes. Let's first select the necessary basic skills, so that at least we don't have to worry about it for several years. Under the reflection of the magma furnace, time quickly came to the next day in the early morning. When the distant morning light had just broken through the thin mist in the mountains, the hard-working cafeteria ants had already gotten up early, lit the fire, and moved out a lot of ingredients from the underground ice cellar, and started preparing breakfast. Senior Siko, Nenzato, Yang Buhu and others took a group of teachers from the school and came to the gate of the student dormitory, ringing the bell and calling out to most of the children who were still lazy in bed. Some of the younger ones even had to be helped and supervised by the teachers themselves. Fortunately, these teenagers seemed to understand how lucky they were now. And they all behaved actively and proactively. In short, after the initial chaos, it took about 10 minutes for the 100 or so teenagers to gather in front of the dormitory gate according to their respective age groups. They stood in 3 squares, and then led by their respective teachers to the school's large playground to run exercises. Looking back at Liang Yue at this time, he was already standing in the center of the raw stone playground, performing martial arts exercises for a while. When this team of students entered the field and started running, he had already come to a nearby pavilion with sweat and morning frost all over his body, spread out the rice paper, and began to practice his regular script. Chapter 545 London. The Academy's curriculum was provisionally arranged to be similar to that of a high school in later generations of China. After finishing their exercises, the group of children were taken back to the dormitory to wash up, dress, and tidy their clothes. Even though it was already the 12th lunar month of winter, and the temperature was approaching freezing, the school of Liang Yu's family had a 24-hour supply of hot water thanks to the endless heat from the magma furnace. After a simple wash, the 100 or so teachers and students were taken to the school cafeteria. Breakfast consisted of pickled vegetables, thin porridge, vegetable and meat buns, boiled eggs, milk, apples, and oranges. Among them, eggs, milk, and fruit were essential items in the meal, and everyone had to finish them. Frankly speaking, this kind of food allocation was somewhat extravagant in this era, but the group of children were at the stage of rapid growth and needed various nutritional supplements. Moreover, Liang Yue was from a wealthy family and didn't care about this consumption at all. Not to mention, after he finished his daily routine, he came to the cafeteria and looked around, seeing the entire hall filled with little fellows wearing thick cotton Taoist robes, with their hair tied in buns, gathering together to eat. For a moment, Liang Yue felt a sense of gratification in his heart. After breakfast, the daytime curriculum consisted of cultural classes in the morning and military training for about half a month in the afternoon. This kind of militarized training was only used to calm the mind and implement discipline, so naturally it didn't need to be too professional. As for the instructors, Nan Lixiang, a proper professional special operations police officer, was responsible, while the other women and a group of teachers assisted from the side. As for Liang Yue, after arranging such a teaching plan, he temporarily chose to be a hands-off manager, preparing to go out for a while. As for the destination, it was naturally the European battlefield, where fierce fighting was taking place. Previously, he had been entangled in various affairs around him and couldn't spare any time. In addition, in this trial of the heavens, he didn't have any tasks related to Wonder Woman, so the necessity of going to the European battlefield was naturally delayed again and again, and placed behind other affairs. Now, the situation around Liang Yue had basically stabilized, so the trip to Europe naturally became logical. However, the purpose of his trip to the European battlefield was not to find the protagonist Wonder Woman Diana, but to obtain the mother box of the human race. Secondly, he wanted to collect some weapons and equipment from various battlefields and hand them over to Xiao Wu to supplement his own weapons technology system, in order to prepare for the future Asian battlefield. As for Wonder Woman herself, if he could meet her, he would chat with her, but it didn't matter if he didn't see her. She was just a little girl who had just walked out of a solitary island. Liang Yue didn't care about her weapons and equipment. The most precious thing was her demigod bloodline, but he didn't need that either. The situation was roughly like this. So, after saying hello to the women in the academy who were gradually getting into the swing of things, Liang Yue came to a relatively secluded earthen slope. He took out the sling ring from his storage space and drew a few circles in the air with both hands. In the blink of an eye, orange space lines immediately appeared in the void, opening a space portal in front of him. Squeak. At this moment, just as Liang Yue took a step and was about to cross the door, Xiao Jinggang suddenly jumped down from a bare tree branch beside him and landed gently on his shoulder. What? You want to go on a trip with me? Squeak. To be precise, if Liang Yue's space door didn't have a ridiculous error, then the area he was in at the moment should be in England. London. World War I lasted for more than 4 years. Specifically from August 1914 to November 1918, the two main warring parties were two major military groups, namely the Allied powers of Germany, Austria, and Italy, and the Entente powers of Britain, France, and Russia. At first glance, the wartime was not long, but during this period, a total of more than 16 million people died, including more than 8.5 million soldiers and 8.3 million civilians. The population affected by the war was as high as 1.3 billion. Of course, these actually have nothing to do with Liang Yue. His purpose here is not to end the war and maintain world peace. After all, the purpose of this war was not simply justice and evil, to use a not so appropriate analogy, to describe it slightly. It was because of the uneven distribution of spoils within the capitalist world. Newcomers wanted to rise to the top, while the old ones wanted to defend their territory and refused to compromise, so the two sides fell into a fierce battle for interests unless aliens suddenly descended to invade the Earth, or a space channel suddenly opened in the void, connecting to another ownerless life planet. Otherwise, the war will not stop. As for why he came to London, the reason is that this is the rear general base of the Allied powers. In addition to the military headquarters and political center, there are also a large number of industrialized production bases in various areas of the city, including various technology research and development laboratories, industrial parks, military factories, etc. These are all valuable assets for the intelligent brain Xiao Wu, and they are the basis for it to climb to higher technological fields. The time now is the end of November 1915. To be honest, Liang Yue didn't know whether Wonder Woman, as the phased protagonist of the current DC world, had left Paradise Island and come to the outside world at this time. But if she had already walked out of Paradise Island, London would be her first stop. In addition, the location of Paradise Island, according to common sense analysis, should be in the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere not far from the British Isles, because after leaving Paradise Island, Diana only slept on a wooden boat for one night before arriving in London. However, at the beginning of the plot, the male protagonist in the plot was still in a secret base in Turkey, snatching a wooden airplane and escaping all the way with Dr. Poison's notes with a load of that small broken plane. It was really impossible to complete the feat of crossing the entire Western European continent while being chased by several identical enemy planes and crashing on the coast near Paradise Island. If analyzed from this perspective, Paradise Island should be located within the Mediterranean Sea. In short, movies, comics, and the real world ultimately have many incomprehensible differences. Liang Yue also didn't know what strange problems he would encounter at that time due to the time difference. It was already evening in China, but London had just arrived at noon, which was the moment when the construction period was busy. The war on the front lines was in full swing, and the factories in the rear were naturally working overtime, with various workshops and machines taking turns to fully produce various logistics materials and weapon supplies one after another. Towering chimneys were constantly emitting black smoke. In addition, the weather in London today seemed a bit gloomy, and thick clouds were covering the sky and the earth. Therefore, for a time, the entire surrounding city seemed to be immersed in a mist, wet and sticky, and the visibility was frighteningly low. As soon as he stepped on this land, Liang Yue put an invisibility spell on himself, and then took Xiao Jinggang and flew up. After a while of picking and choosing, he landed on the rooftop of a tall building, opening the panoramic sand table. In just 7 or 8 seconds, most of the ground building models of the foggy city had been included in front of him. Squeak, the smell is unpleasant? That's for sure. It's the era of large-scale industrial production. Now the city is full of workshops and boiler rooms, so of course the air is bad. See those chimneys and black smoke? They are all produced by burning coal. Squeak squeak. Leave? This is not urgent for the time being. We have to stay for 3 or 2 days. After saying that, Liang Yue stuffed the somewhat restless Xiao Jinggang into his chest pocket. Then, with a thought, he opened a few tiny space holes around him, slowly filing his surroundings with the air from the McWorld. Now, Xiao Jinggang, who was originally a little uncomfortable, also calmed down and looked around, clinging to his collar. Chapter 546, Green Lantern. In the following days, Liang Yue spent a total of 3 days in the city of London. Before him, during this time, he spent most of his time wandering around, collecting various industrial products, as well as factory production lines. He either bought them with gold, pounds, or other things, or simply went to the factory at night and took them away. In addition, he also made several trips to the museums in the city. All the collections inside, whether displayed in the exhibition hall or stored in the underground warehouse, were all packed up and swept away by him, whether it was various precious collections from China, or historical relics and burial objects plundered from all over the world by British pirates and armies in previous eras. None of them were spared. All of them were taken into his own stronghold world. Is taking without permission considered theft? Liang Yue's behavior may be a bit like that, but so what? Are the collections displayed in the museum acquired in a fair and upright manner? If someone really ran out at this time, even if it was just to argue with Liang Yue, saying that plundering through war is indeed a legitimate way, then Liang Yue would definitely not mind starting a war with this country on the spot. Unfortunately, during his entire scavenging process, no one stood up to confront or communicate with him, even though he had intentionally slowed down his pace. It was all calm and peaceful just like that. 3 days later, when Liang Yue felt that this trip was complete after scraping enough materials and machinery from all over London, he crossed the sea and began to advance towards other countries on the European continent. The foggy city of London in front of him was finally inevitably caught in a vortex of public opinion, and various news and information began to ferment wildly. Soon, news that large-scale thefts had occurred in various museums, machine factories, lathes, and production lines in the London area began to spread to all parts of the world through major print media and radio stations. For a time, world public opinion was in an uproar, and it became another focal topic. Besides the intelligence on the First World War, many government officials, members of parliament, military personnel, nobles, social celebrities, and people from all walks of life also appeared and began to condemn this behavior in public. They claimed that, in response to this extremely immoral, irrational, heinous, and provocative crime, their British Empire would definitely investigate to the end and find out the truth. In short, it was an endless stream of harsh words, but Liang Yue, as the person involved, had no mood to pay attention to these people's nonsense at this time. In the past 3 days, he had indeed taken away a lot of useful materials from the London area. Moreover, the information reported by the media and public opinion was actually incomplete. Among the batch of materials taken away by Liang Yue this time, in addition to various civilian machines, machinery, and production lines, there were also a large number of military and military-industrial equipment mixed in. For example, a considerable number of gun production lines, ammunition production lines, artillery production lines, etc., and their finished equipment, as well as a large number of gunpowder, artillery steel, and even chemical raw materials and other basic military materials. But in fact, with Liang Yue's mobility and efficiency, even if he wanted to scavenge such a wide range of items, it would still not take 3 days. The reason why this happened was just because he deliberately slowed down his pace a little. To put it bluntly, Liang Yue was actually waiting for the appearance of the Otherworlders on the British Isles, as well as Wonder Woman Diana and others. By the way, he also collected information about these people. However, he was ultimately disappointed there was no one, The whole process was almost entirely at his disposal if Diana's side could be explained by the timing not being right, the plot not coming, she hadn't left Paradise Island yet, or had already passed a London route. Then Liang Yue was indeed a little disappointed with the British Otherworlders, but if he happened to encounter a museum, factory building, or some private collection room, as long as there was something that caught his eye, Liang Yue would almost always take a part of it directly. However, this kind of casual mentality, although it once made him gain a lot, the mother box of the human race that he really cared about was still nowhere to be found according to the arrangement in the original plot. This mother box was blasted out of an unknown forest during a very accidental artillery coverage in the First World War. Later, it was found by someone and buried in a church in Austria. During World War II, it was obtained by, and then immediately intercepted by the Allied forces. After several twists and turns, it was brought to the United States. So, following this clue, Liang Yue opened his Tinsigan all the way and almost floated through all the territory of Austria, but still found nothing. After scratching his head and feeling puzzled for a while, Liang Yue had to comfort himself with the idea that the opportunity had not yet arrived, and temporarily gave up looking for the mother box anyway. According to the development of the plot, this mother box will always be hidden in the church after the end of World War I. When the time comes, he will come and take it. He can still afford to wait for a mere 2 or 3 years. Thinking so in his heart, Liang Yue then ended this trip to Europe, drew a circle, and instead took little King Kong and stepped into the United States. In this way, when Liang Yue returned to China again and appeared in his own academy, it was already half a year later. During this time, Liang Yue traveled almost every railway in the United States, rode every train on the country's railways, and viewed all the journeys and scenery along the way. Finally, during a trip to a Western American town, he obtained a treasure that was almost dreamlike in his plan: Green Lantern. This object originally fell in China as a special meteorite, and was later carved into the shape of a palace lantern by a wizard named Chang. This lamp has its own consciousness. Later, it was treated as an ordinary antique, and after several transfers, it was eventually brought to the United States and fell into the hands of a mentally ill person. After that, it was carved into the shape of a train lamp by this person, and hung grandly on a train. Later, probably sometime in 1940, it would be obtained by Alan Scott, who was on the verge of death at that time. This Green Lantern will completely awaken and directly grant the other party the full version of Green Lantern's power. However, as the first person in this title, Alan Scott is actually a wild Green Lantern and does not belong to the Green Lantern Corps that spans the DC universe. Only later, after intersecting with the second-generation Green Lantern of Earth, will he become an honorary member of the Green Lantern Corps. But the source of its energy comes from this planet. To be precise, it should be the life energy of the Earth, referred to as the Earth Force, and this time, after being touched by Liang Yue, this Green Lantern probably felt that he had waited for his chosen person, so he also woke up in this way. The first-generation Green Lantern or something, naturally has nothing to do with Alan Scott completely. As for whether the other party is alive or dead more than 20 years later, to be honest, there are too many such death events happening on Earth every day, especially in the war years. Tens of thousands of lives may be reimbursed every day. But what does that have to do with him, Liang Yue? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 547: Green Lantern. In fact, when this Green Lantern fell from the universe to Earth as a meteorite, it possessed its own independent consciousness. Moreover, after being carved into a palace lantern by that Chinese wizard, it had foreseen its future experiences. 1 appearance brings death, 2 appearances bring rebirth, 3 appearances bring divine power. Among them, 1 appearance represents the death of the wizard Chang and the villagers who chose to beat Chang to death out of fear and ignorance. 2 appearances refers to the lantern awakening a second time in the body of an American mental patient, curing his ailments, and then being carved from a palace lantern into a train lamp. 3 appearances bring divine power refers to when its consciousness awakens for the 3rd time. It will bestow the Green Lantern's divine abilities upon the person who can awaken it. The Green Lantern's power is extremely magical. Even its basic abilities allow the wearer to materialize creations through imagination and willpower. The Green Lantern ring is known as the most powerful weapon in the universe, and its effect is greater for those with stronger willpower. Furthermore, the limit of the Green Lantern's power is unknown, limited only by the Green Lantern himself. In this way, The selection criteria for this green train lamp are already very clear. It is based on the size of the toucher's willpower and mental strength, and perhaps also a measure of good and evil. Its first owner, the wizard Chang, should have been an extraordinary person and cultivator in the Chinese region, whose willpower was naturally much stronger than that of ordinary people. The second owner was a mental patient, presumably a person with various confused thoughts, wild ideas, and active mental strength. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to transform a simple and elegant antique palace lantern into a train lamp. Its original third owner, Alan Scott, was able to be sensed by the Green Lantern's will because he erupted with a strong desire to survive and mental thoughts at the brink of death. In all likelihood, he only gained recognition by chances. For Liang Yue, it goes without saying at this time, he had already advanced to the Foundation establishment stage, and his level of mental strength and willpower, if not the best on Earth, was at least among the top of this planet. Coupled with his sunny, handsome, serious, lively, firm, persistent, opinionated, and righteous personality, therefore, his existence is naturally an excellent candidate for the Green Lantern's power. When Liang Yue's hand inadvertently touched the dusty train lamp, the Green Lantern's will was immediately awakened from its slumber. It directly recognized him as its master and proactively communicated and explained many things to him, without any hesitation throughout the entire process. Okay, let's get back to the topic. In fact, relying on imagination to achieve concrete creation is only the basic ability of the Green Lantern ring. In addition, the Green Lantern can also use and influence most known basic cosmic energies, including electromagnetic energy, gravity, radiation, heat, light, vibration, and so on. Furthermore, it has been theoretically proven to possess the foundation to utilize the energy of other dimensions, namely magic, true ki, mana, spiritual power, and other fields, and through the Green Lantern energy, as well as the will of the person wearing the Green Lantern ring, it can construct any special item or structure imaginable. As long as there is enough willpower, it can realize and construct any structure from the microscopic to the macroscopic level. This even includes kryptonite and kryptonite radiation. In addition to this, the Green Lantern ring's power also includes constructing force fields, amplifying strength, phase shifting, environmental playback, energy twinning, energy absorption, flight, wormhole traversal, time travel, healing, electromagnetic scanning, uniform manufacturing, and so on. In addition, the will within the Green Lantern is knowledgeable and can also be used as an encyclopedia of the galaxy and even the universe, a universal translator, and a homing signal for other Green Lanterns. Then it also has the ability to influence and change the minds of others, create ring worlds, resurrect, create pocket universes, edit instructions, preset commands, alter molecules, replicate rings, and even grant the wearer the ability to be immortal. Moreover, the holders of the Green Lantern ring are diverse, and the races are different. Some of them are biological individuals like Liang Yue, such as a squirrel or something. Some are simply the concrete existence of a planet, or even a virus. And according to the different races and forms of each ring wearer, they can also exert their own unique abilities. In short, perhaps the Green Lantern is not the most powerful existence in the current DC universe, but he is a versatile player, enough to cope with most situations. As long as the wearer's level is high enough, the ability exerted can be enough to change a lot. In addition, as the source of the original Green Lantern, although this train lamp that Liang Yue obtained also needs to be charged once every 24 hours, the source of its energy is the starherd. In other words, even without the Green Lantern core and the OA's main energy battery, this thing can be charged through other means, invisibly. This brings quite a few convenient conditions for someone's actions. For example, Liang Yue can consider taking this lamp out of the DC universe and try to charge it with the starherd of other planets. Not all planets can be used to replenish energy, that's for sure, but having hope is better than having none, isn't it? Therefore, this meteorite itself is special enough, possessing its own independent consciousness, able to communicate with the will of the planet, obtain corresponding permissions, and then be granted the use of the life energy contained in the starherd. And based on this energy, it can be transformed into various forces that can influence and control multiple rules. As for Liang Yue, these various complex and diverse energy utilization techniques and conversion methods are certainly very important. It can help him achieve many things, and at the same time, it can be used as a sample machine for him to study the various rule systems and power operation methods in the current DC world. But the Earth's life energy contained in the starherd is actually the core of everything and is more worthy of his in-depth research. In Liang Yue's current situation, if he can gain a certain amount of experience in this area, it will play an immeasurable role in his future cultivation and advancement path. In the case of temporarily unclear future and unable to determine whether the Green Lantern ring can be used in other heavens. Starting to study the Earth's life energy is the top priority for him. Chapter 548 The most powerful weapon in the universe. So, this thing is really as magical as you say, yet don't think it's just an inconspicuous train light now. That's just because it was deliberately carved into this shape. In fact, its material is quite special and it also has its own consciousness, can communicate with the will of the Earth, and use the life energy in the star core to transform into various magical abilities. Is it like the spirit of a high-level magic weapon in a novel, more or less? Then what are you going to use it for? If it's for fighting enemies, it doesn't seem like you'll need it much, right? After all, you've traveled all over Europe and America this time, and you haven't encountered any danger. Then let's just treat it as a backup plan, to keep at the bottom of the chest. In normal times, I plan to use it to study the Earth's life energy, so as to figure out the follow-up cultivation methods. Didn't you say that the consciousness in this thing is knowledgeable and can be regarded as the Encyclopedia Galactica? Why not just ask it about things like cultivation research? Of course I will ask. Besides it, Nesta's side can't be let go either. However, other people's things can only be used as a reference after all. What I plan to create is a cultivation method that is most suitable for myself, the life energy inside the Earth. So, in this way, Liang Yue, are you planning to continue down this path by using the innate imagery of thunder firewood, as well as the wood spiritual power attribute after fusion? Of course, we are going to stay in this world for a full 30 years. If we don't work hard, people will get old, eh? Will we get old too? Of course. So at least you have to advance to above the Xiantian realm. The higher the level in realm, the longer the lifespan will be, and the appearance can always be maintained. Oh no, I didn't even think about this problem before then. Jinxiangji, you have to work hard. Although I have been going to dungeons with everyone all the time, I have not neglected my internal skills in private. Now I have reached the late stage of Haoshan. It's not far from the peak. I've only just reached the middle stage of Haoshan. Alice, we shouldn't have returned to reality early when Liang Yue was in the Naruto world. I'm only in the middle stage of Haoshan too. I spend most of my energy on practicing magic when I'm free. As for me, in the academy, the group who had been apart for half a year were now sitting around a gazebo. At the beginning, the topic of discussion was still the green car light they were surrounding, but as time went on, it slowly turned to beauty, skincare, and maintenance. Liang Yue was already used to this, so he temporarily shifted his attention, humming a little tune with a relaxed expression, picked up the green lantern in the middle, and then removed the lampshade according to the instructions of this green light consciousness. At the time, he took out a green, shimmering stone from the back of the lamp holder. This thing was about the size of a chicken egg. And it was crystal clear and flawless, with a lustrous color. Even under the moonlight, it could present a full, positive green color. A dignified cosmic meteorite, after crossing billions of miles, fell to the Earth. It seemed that the volume should not be small, otherwise, the Chinese wizard at the time would not have been able to carve it into a palace lantern. It was a pity that it later fell into the hands of a lunatic. And now there was only this little bit left. However, perhaps it was destined by heaven. This only remaining piece of egg-sized, jade-like pleasing green stone material was actually the essence of the entire meteorite, but in any case, the lost scraps from the same source should also be extremely precious, or even unique. After all, that was the material that could make the strongest weapon in the universe. What wouldn't be good to do with it? Temporarily put these distracting thoughts behind him according to the requirements of this thing itself. Liang Yue moved his mind, and a green flame suddenly rose from the egg-sized stone material. Then, in a burst of light, the green flame turned into a carving knife. Picking up this sharp little knife, Liang Yue began to cut the stone slowly and unhurriedly. As a wild green lantern who has not yet joined the job and will never officially join the job, Liang Yue's green lantern ring naturally does not need to be carved into the shape of standard equipment like other green lanterns. However, the symbol with two horizontal lines and a circle in the middle is still indispensable according to the consciousness. This symbol seemed to symbolize some kind of rule, which could help it communicate with the entire universe. Liang Yue naturally had no objection to this. It took about 10 minutes to complete the carving of this completely green ring, and then there was a careful polishing. After finishing, he took out a piece of iridium ingot from the base world. Relying on the power of the green lantern ring, he cut a corner from it, softened it, and slowly wrapped it around the ring band and the hollow of the symbol. The moment this thing was completely fixed, everything around was silent for a moment. The night, which was originally filled with gentle breeze and chirping insects, suddenly became quiet at this moment. Under the envelope of the purple iridium metal, The emerald green lantern ring appeared even more gorgeous, whether it was the logo with 2 horizontal lines and a circle in the middle, or the circle of delicate and tiny hollow patterns that Liang Yue deliberately left in the middle of the ring band. They all looked extraordinarily harmonious under the contrast of this green color. The next moment, this small ring suddenly burst out with emerald green flames, instantly illuminating the surroundings. As the owner of this wild green lantern, Liang Yue could feel a long-lost sense of pleasure from the green lantern consciousness at this moment. It seemed to be transformed into green flame, wantonly stretching its posture, and curiously looking at every affair around it in this way. After surging and active for more than half an hour, it began to calm down, and then shrank into the ring, completely falling into someone's palm. Seeing this, Liang Yue unceremoniously put the ring on his left index finger, turning his head. Just as he was about to say a few words, he saw that the women sitting around had already put their attention on the scraps that he had left when cutting the green light before. This is really good eyesight, as the essence of the Green Lantern meteorite. Even without the blessing of the meteorite consciousness, it cannot be used to communicate with a star core, nor can it obtain life energy and then transform into various magical powers. But even if only viewed from the perspective of the material, this thing must be an extremely precious thing. Listening carefully, at this time, Saya, Zia Ozheo, Arwen and others seemed to be discussing using these remaining scraps as ring faces, and using the iridium ingot next to them to create a batch of rings with the same material as his green light ring. This is not difficult. Using the power of the Green Lantern ring to make these rings, you don't even need to use any tools, and you can directly produce the finished product. However, before we start, we should first ask Nesta. He is an expert in refining weapons, and we are far behind soon. Facing the questions from the women, Liang Yue also gave his own suggestions. Chapter 549 Turbulent. In the past 6 months or so, Liang Yue had been wandering around outside, engaging in petty theft and other minor misdeeds, which could be said to have yielded quite a few gains. Meanwhile, the women holding down the fort at the academy, while also supervising the construction of the mountain gate, had also achieved significant results and reaped considerable rewards. The most important achievement was, of course, that after this period of adjustment and adaptation, the children in the academy had finally become accustomed to the rhythm of life here. They gradually began to calm their minds and immerse themselves in it, and with a certain foundation in reading and writing. The teachers would invariably incorporate fragments of Taoist knowledge into their lectures, whether it was an anecdote about the deeds and legends of the ancients, or an analysis of a few allusions and technical terms. These were, of course, deliberate efforts by the women, methods they had discussed and devised during meetings with the teacher's subtle influence, gradual progress. In addition, over the past 6 months, many more students had been arriving from all over to enroll in the academy, bringing certificates issued by the Republican government. They were personally escorted by their parents. These people were naturally the 300 promised places that Yuan Datao had offered to win people's hearts and gather momentum for himself. This group was a mix of boys and girls, young and old, mostly children aged 5 or 6, 8 or 9. But there were also a few elderly people who were already over 50. They mostly came from famous and influential families, scholarly households, and wealthy families from all over China. Of course, there were also quite a few descendants from the families of military officers who had previously belonged to Yuan Datao's faction. Like attending a fair, they all flocked together in the previous 2 or 3 months, enrolling in teams. As a result, the Mountain Academy now had more than 500 people residing there as students alone. For a time, the campus became more lively, no longer as quiet as before, and began to bustle with activity. In addition, because the students in the academy came from complex backgrounds, covering almost all levels of the Republic of China, there were many conflicts in their views and ideas. To this end, the women had come up with many ideas and worked hard. For example, during the 6 months that Liang Yue was away, the academy added many sports facilities and specialized venues. Sports and game equipment such as parallel bars, swings, climbing poles, climbing nets, and trampolines were only the basics. And various basketball courts and badminton courts were also developed. There were 2 newly completed large football fields alone. One was built in a valley at the foot of the academy's mountain, and the other was arranged in parallel with it. However, due to the insufficient area of open space, most of them were excavated inside the mountain. In short, the establishment of these sports venues provided the necessary objective conditions for the integration and cooperation of students. The academy organized a wave of sports events almost every few days. In addition, the Mountain Gate residence on Mount Taipei was now nearing completion over the past 6 months, with a continuous addition of funds and high-level construction technicians from various places, The original design drawings of the mountain gate had been revised again and again from the beginning, strictly following the Taoist laws and traditions. The architectural style that complemented the mountain's terrain had gone astray all the way, and as it was being built, it moved towards an unknown grand narrative among them. Saya-chan, teacher Shizuka, Alwyn, and others were naturally the most meritorious, especially in recent times. With Liang Yue away from home, and without his presence and suppression, the women had all returned to their nature and began to let themselves go. A well-built large Taoist temple was forcibly turned into post-modern online game style by them. Many inappropriate or overly expensive mountain terrains and landforms were like playing with building blocks in their hands, demolishing and falling from the east. Under the simultaneous flight of milling handles and iron hose, they could be tidied up in an hour or two. Various alpine streams and waterfall landscapes were even more readily available, appearing as soon as they were said to exist, shocking the many workers and laborers on the spot, who then directly called it a miracle. Then, the style of this mountain gate project began to deviate, and a group of architects began to have a surge of inspiration, and new design plans were frequently released after more than half a year. The buildings on Mount Taipei had already changed their appearance, from the original Taoist temple cluster-style architecture to a nondescript, yet magnificent and awe-inspiring palace. Liang Yue didn't have anything to say about this anyway. He didn't care about this expense. Having just returned from a trip abroad, he was really flush with money. As long as he could guarantee the daily benefits and salaries of the workers, he didn't care about anything else. However, unlike the small circle created by Liang Yue's academy in Sect Mountain Gate, the entire China could be described as turbulent and stormy during the 6 months or so that he was away from home. Simply put, Yuan Datao ascended the throne, and then Yuan Datao abdicated. The interval between them was less than half a year. Just like a farce during the process, people from all walks of life were indignant. Students went on strike, workers went on strike, merchants closed their markets, and soldiers even staged armed uprisings in various places for a time. The flames of war were raging and the smoke was everywhere. Even many of the local military officers who were originally under Yuan Datao's command participated in this armed struggle against him. The situation, which had at least been peaceful on the surface, took a sharp turn for the worse for a time. The entire China was like an angry tiger, howling wildly, and slapping itself in the face. Yuan Shikai, who had originally gained fame for forcing the Qing Emperor to abdicate and kicking the Manchus out of the game, was now labeled as a regressive and national sinner under the propaganda and attacks of many forces. Yuan Datao was obviously unprepared for this originally. He had certainly expected that someone would oppose him and attack him for becoming emperor, but he absolutely did not expect that this wave of opposition would come so fiercely. It was simply one wave after another, almost continuous. Moreover, the inside of his own camp also experienced successive collapses and unstable foundations. Those wealthy gentry and dignitaries whom he had pinned his hopes on and specially offered a large number of places in different sects to win over, did not participate in the opposition to him during this period, at least not openly, but at the same time, they did not clearly stand up to support him, but very cunningly chose to sit on the sidelines and adopted a strategy of not helping either side in secret. They accelerated the pace of the promised places, and sent the outstanding younger generations of their families to Liang Yue's Mountain Academy. At the same time, they once again donated money and goods to the Mountain Gate, and sent a batch of construction workers over, hoping that their sect could be completed as soon as possible. Seeing this situation, Yuan Datao was furious for a time, but he was helpless after all. Even the army in his hands was not very obedient to him now, and the military power actually under his control was insufficient. The hearts of the Biang faction were scattered, and he was surrounded by enemies on all sides. In terms of reputation alone, he was not enough to convince the public and subdue all parties. So, under this situation, after only forcibly maintaining the emperor's dream for a few months, Yuan Shikai gloomily announced his abdication and stepped down in a hurry, disheartened. He then fell ill and collapsed directly on the sickbed. Chapter 550 Return of Favor. After learning of this news, Liang Yue stayed in the academy for the night. The next morning, during the morning exercise, he gave the students a bucket of chicken soup, then ran to the construction site at the mountain gate to take a look, and told the workers about their meals. Then, he drew a circle on the spot and directly returned to his residence in Beiping City, this time back to Beijing. Liang Yue only wanted to visit Yuan Datao's illness and situation, regardless of whether the other party is now bearing the title of a national sinner, acting against the tide, etc. As far as Liang Yue is concerned, objectively speaking, Yuan Datao was kind to him if it weren't for the other party's tossing his own Mountain Gate sect wouldn't have been established at the same time. The issuance of the right to bear arms within the sect also meant that his own White Cloud Mountains alien sect was destined to be different from the very beginning. So, in terms of both emotion and reason, although Yuan Datao is now down and out and seriously ill, he should still pay him a visit. With this in mind, Liang Yue quickly set off from home, walking briskly along the way. Walking on the street, he didn't forget to buy some good-looking breakfasts from the roadside stalls. But to be honest, the beeping city at this time seemed to have become a little different from when he left. That is, before Yuan Shike proclaimed himself emperor, it was still the same bustling street scene with people coming and going, but the original peaceful and relaxed atmosphere was gone. Vaguely, a sense of urgency that could not be ignored was permeating the air. It was a true reflection of the people's hearts after the turbulent situation, reflecting their confusion and expectations for the future situation at this time. Liang Yue could feel the mood of the people around him. Being in this situation, if he hadn't already understood all of this and knew the historical development trajectory of the next 100 years, I'm afraid that he would have the same feelings as others in his heart now. So, with such a complex mood, Liang Yue walked and stopped along the way, observing the behavior and posture of the people in the streets and alleys, and pondering their feelings and situation at this moment. It took a full hour to arrive at the gate of Yuan's residence. The Yuan family's mansion, which was once bustling with visitors, now also had a bit of desolation between the comings and goings. People unconsciously lowered their voices. Even the servants in the mansion were like this, looking like their power was waning, and they didn't dare to speak loudly. And someone like Liang Yue, who entered through the main entrance in a generous manner, could be regarded as a rare guest in recent times. His visit quickly attracted the attention of the Yuan family up and down. Afterwards, Yuan Datao's son personally came to the gate of the mansion to greet him, and after clarifying his intentions, he led him into Yuan Datao's room. Pushing open the door, a wave of sickness rushed out. First, after turning past a curtain, Liang Yue saw Yuan Datao himself on a window platform. Compared to half a year ago, when he was full of vigor, rosy complexion, and full of ambition, the current Datao seemed to be completely disheartened. Coupled with his full head of white hair and pale cheeks, it was truly a scene of an old man in his twilight years, lying ill in bed. Of course, the current Yuan Datao is not alone after all. No matter how down and out he is, and having just fallen from a high position, he is still the helmsman of the entire Biang. You're here. Seeing Liang Yue enter the door, Yuan Datao's slightly dim old eyes suddenly lit up. Then he subconsciously wanted to get up, but it seemed that due to his physical weakness, he staggered and fell back on the bed. It's okay, your body doesn't look that bad, it's just a little weak, and your spirit is a little sluggish. Taking a look at the other party's body, Liang Yue roughly understood the old guy's situation. Obviously, the jar of Baguo wine he left before work, the originally fatal uremia, is now no longer a problem. Yuan Datao's current situation is purely due to old age and physical decline, coupled with depression. The ambition and desire that originally supported him to move forward suddenly fell through, which obviously made him suffer a lot. Under worry and anger, it is inevitable that it will affect his body. It's true, thanks to the Taoist priest's jar of medicinal wine. If it weren't for it, Yuan would be afraid that he would be terminally ill and die soon. With the support of his family, Yuan Datao barely sat up against the head of the bed, and said to him with a wry smile. Then, after experiencing this situation, do you have any gains? Liang Yue heard the words, smiled and looked at the other party. Alice, what else can I gain? Even my own people can't be trusted. Yuan is now disheartened, and he can't arouse any ambition in his heart. He just feels utterly disappointed without hope. I'm afraid that the days to come will just be lingering on. Speaking, Yuan Datao swallowed his saliva, but his eyes kept staring at Liang Yue opposite, and continued, it's just that the old man still has one thing he doesn't understand, and I hope Liang Dorn can help answer it. Please speak. Yuan asked himself. When he entertained you aliens, he can also be said to have been as attentive and courteous as possible, but in the end, why didn't anyone choose to stay and assist me? Could it be that Yuan is really so useless? Although we aliens are not familiar with political affairs and often practice in seclusion in the deep mountains, we do not lack the vision to see people. What you did before was indeed good, but people are already in a state of decline, relying entirely on a spirit and ambition to support them. According to the state at that time, you can only live for 1 or 2 years at most, and you will come to an end. Cough cough cough. He ha 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 ha. So it is, so it is. No wonder, those aliens from famous sects would leave me without hesitation. Haley looking at Yuan Datao, who is already showing a look of self-deprecation, leaning against the bed frame in a daze, and the Yuan family's children and concubines next to him, who were panicked and secretly weeping when they heard this. Liang Yue sighed secretly at this time. flipped his sleeves, took out a bottle of ancient fruit wine, and took 2 teacups from the side, pulled out a bottle stopper, and poured the dark blue liquid into it. He handed a cup to Yuan Datao and drank a cup himself. Then what are your plans next? What plans can I have? Just wait for death in peace. Yuan Shike heard the words, lowered his head and looked at the wine in the cup, and drank it all in one gulp. Then, feeling the medicinal power that was quickly traveling through his body, he hurriedly looked over again in surprise. This wine is better than the previous jar. It can repair damage and nourish the body and soul. With it, you can live for at least 5 or 6 more years without any problem. Speaking, Liang Yue picked up the wine bottle again and filled the old man's glass. Then Taoist priest, you are just repaying the kindness. You built a mountain gate for me, and I will extend your life for a few years. No one can say anything about this back and forth. Also, if you have nothing to do, then go to Xi'an to find me. I am in the academy under White Cloud Mountain, and I am short of a director of education. After speaking, Liang Yue clasped his fists at Yuan Datao, turned and left. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.